22nd, 2021. This is the Superintendent's Workshop. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 1 p.m. And the purpose of today's workshop is to go through several items I see as presentations. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have a number of items, as you just stated. I will introduce them by the cabinet member in which they are presenting. First up is Mr. Fagan, who will be presenting 3 items for us, which is an overview of the upcoming budget. Item number B, which is a review of quotes for finance. That's actually the laptop purchases the board has been briefed on. And then item number C is a review of the agreement for Rutledge Yesenia. And then we will go to Mr. Meyer following that. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Fagan.
Thank you, Sue. Through the chair. Yes. Mic's on. We good? So first presentation is to kind of give the board a briefing of where we are financially, where we've been through the year, and a little hint as to where we're going to go next year. First thing we want to talk about is the Fitch rating. In March of 2021, Fitch reviewed our bond ratings and moved us from a negative outlook to a stable outlook. This was a monumental task. Some of the reasons that they cited as to why they increased it from stable to negative, from negative to stable, was one, the receipt of the CARES funding from the state, also $1 million from the county. We also had an increase in our pure pupil allocation from the state. Also the approval of the critical millage by the voters for the next 4 years. The pending announcement of an additional $12 million of ESSER 2 money coming in, and a very low overall long-term liability burden. Again, a very positive outlook for the district. Next thing was going to go over is the financials to give you an update as to where we are financially by fund. First off, I want to thank Mrs. Kim Coltman behind me. She has this her major task every month to produce these financials in the detail that you see today with explanations and a very thorough analysis. To begin with, first off, we have a strong cash balance of approximately $100 million. We're currently in the review. We do anticipate not having to do a TAN this year, but I always hold that in reserve because I can't predict the future. Next one is general fund. We're currently at 90% of collection rate. We've collected $2.9 million more than the prior year. Our net position is approximately $20 million, and by the end of the year, we hope to be and plan to be at about $4 million higher than our ending fund balance in the prior year, which would put us right about $20 million as compared to $16 million. This will increase that ending fund balance from about 11% to approximately 13%. Might go a little bit higher once we get through cleaning up year end. As you remember also, the voters did approve the critical millage, as we refer to as the DOM. 2021 is the last year of the prior approval. So when they approved in August, they approved the next 4 years, which starts 21-22 and goes through 24-25. The primary purpose of this allocation from the voters is a high-quality education for all students, retaining of high-quality instructors, mental health, and also creation of technology-rich classrooms. Debt service. All of our debt will be paid off in approximately 10 years, $61 million in the next 5 years, $44 million in the 5 years after that. We will have the charter schools paid off for our litigation from them. We owe them approximately $400,000. That will be paid off in January of 22. Capital fund, very good position there, collected over $32 million, 90% of our budget. Remember, we get most of that money in the beginning of the year. Net position is good as an $18 million as of today. We expect to end in a positive position. And also remember, part of that ending fund balance are your impact fees. Year to date, we've collected $23 million in impact fees, spent about 15. We have a balance of 8. That balance of 8 will be building some additional classrooms at Sebastian River Middle School. Next slide is a little review of the other programs, which is food service. Collected about 73% of their funding. Year-to-date position is positive at about 412. If you remember, at the end of last year, they ran a little negative because of COVID, had a negative ending fund balance. General fund loaned them money to have their ending fund balance be 0. We never want to show a negative ending fund balance. They have repaid that money back to the district, and looks like they'll probably end the year in the black with approximately $600,000 ending fund balance. A very good feat, and hats off to the food service team. Special revenue, this is your federal money. This is your IDA funds, your Title I funds, your Carl Perkins funds, and of course your ESSER funds. Very good positive here. Remember, they don't carry a fund balance. Whatever you get, you spend, and it rolls to the next year. And we'll talk a little bit more about the ESSER in just a couple of minutes. Insurance fund, collected $20 million, 82% of the budget. Currently in a positive position of $1.9 million. Fund balance is approximately $8.4 million, which is about $5 million more than what we need for safe harbor. And that was all anticipated because of the COVID. Projected ending fund balance is going to be probably around $9 million. There was a 3% increase in the healthcare rates for this year. There is pending discussions that in order to bring that fund balance down, there could be discussions of what we call a premium holiday. For 1 month during the year, nobody has to pay premiums. And that will bring it down slightly. Extended day is also very positive. Collected 73% of their budget, have a net position of about $30,000, and they'll probably end the year with a fund balance of approximately $1 million. All in all, still about a $310 million budget. Moving into next year's budget. Through the state, FEFP funding, our FTE slightly increased by 313. This was primarily because, as of last year's COVID, the actual FTE we reported was a little light, but we were able to convince the DOE that most of our students will come back, and we'll be back up to about 17,500, which is approximately where we were in the prior year. The base school allocation increased slightly, had a little bit of discretionary funding. The negative hit to the district was the change in categorical funding for class size. This is where they reduced the funding for pre-K to 3 down 24%. Increased secondary by 6%. Don't really have an explanation as to why. We've asked, we haven't been given any guidance, but they just simply reduced the funding, and that hit to us was a reduction in funding of approximately 1.3, but we got a little pickup in some other areas, so overall, it's a net decrease of about 400,000. We'll be able to cover that with the additional money from ESSER and also the good positive ending fund balance at the end of the year. So really no major deficit to us. One of the things we will be doing this year is working with principals and division staff, training them on their budgets. We'll be holding sessions throughout the year. We're going to start with the beginning principals first, get them up to speed, and then we'll go to some more experienced principals as well. Budget process, as you know, we begin this process early, started in usually March or April, in order to prepare for next year. One of the things we did do was modify the staff allocation model. Not a whole lot of changes, but some, and some of them are very positive. For the elementaries, we didn't change the class size ratio. We kept them all the same. But they did keep the same thing they had in the prior year. They got all their elementary school counselors were not changed. Their third grade interventionists were retained. Their K-2 reading coaches were the same. And Title I, if they were a Title I school, they were required also to buy another math and reading coach if their funding did allow it, in order to make sure they get full support there. We did add a counselor to the elementary level as well as the secondary. This is more of a district-wide school counselor to assist the schools at a little bit more of a global level, working with Pam. We did increase a couple of teacher assistants from IDA. We added some ESOL teachers. We also increased the self-care aides for the pre-K. There's a couple of schools that needed some assistance, so we went ahead and implemented that. We've added them for next year, and we also have a slight reserve for them already established that if their enrollment increases, we'll already have it in the budget to give them some more additional support. That'll help with that process of once they hit a certain number, the allocation will already be there. Secondary schools, slight change in the ratio for the secondary. We retained all the regular positions, counselors, and et cetera. We did add another counselor at the secondary level. This will be more of a district-wide counselor. We also added, we also moved to the 8-period day. So same thing we did last year. We modified the ratio, but we held back some funding into positions in case some of the principals in the schools couldn't quite make it work. So 8-period day, we did the same thing. We held positions back to assist them during this transition. So far, we've given out approximately 16 positions. There was no change in what we call the discretionary fundings per the school. So whenever a school has X number of students, they get X number of dollars for discretionary funding. It's all based on their FTE. There was no change in that funding. I think overall, district-wide, it was a $10,000 difference, simply because of a change in the FTE. The new initiatives, of course, will be implemented throughout the year. We updated average salaries for the $47,005. Remember, health insurance had a slight increase of 3%. That's about $500,000 district-wide, $300,000 for the district, and about $200,000 for employees. FRS went up slightly by 1%. We'll finish out the year and prepare our ending financial statements. Also, the cost savings never ends. In a meeting the other day, we're looking at Care Here and some options for short-term disability, looking to reduce those rates and those costs to the district and employees by about 20%. District cost differential. This came up in a couple of meetings a while back. Thought we'd take a minute and let me re-explain what this is. It's really not a CPI or a cost of living index. It is it's a comparable wage analysis. They compare our wages in our district to other wages in other districts for comparable jobs. There's approximately 484 jobs that they do in this analysis that compare our positions to other counties throughout the state of Florida. The purpose is to get a relative cost of what it costs to hire a plumber here as it does to hire a plumber somewhere else. And what is that difference? If it costs more in Miami-Dade or Collier County, the DCD will be above 1. If it costs less, then it is less than 1. The interesting item is this, is that when they do the calculation, Collier County is the highest with a 1.0512. Hamilton County is the lowest at a less than 1 of 0.9223. When they redistribute these funds, it's approximately $123 million. So if we got $1, if we got less than 1, then we only got 90 cents. They take that other 10 cents and they apply it to some other district. Well, they don't only apply the 123, but they also had to chip in $9 million to make the fund balance from the state. For us, our decrease was approximately $8,000, so no major hit for us. As comparison to some surrounding counties, Okeechobee was a 0.9799, Brevard is a 0.98, Osceola is a 0.98, we're a 0.99, St. Lucie is a 1.00, Martin is a 1.0173. But case in point for Martin, that allowed them to pick up $1.5 million. If we had the same DCD as Martin, we would have picked up $1.4 million. Historically, our DCD has ranged between a low of 0.99 in 1516 to a high of 1.0022 in 1920. So it's never been significantly high, but never been below 0.99. In the FEFP calculation, there's another calculation that is done to compensate districts. It's called the 0.748 discretionary local millage effort compression. This is where if you are less than the district average for this compression ratio, they will give you compensation. They will say you didn't meet the average for this calculation, and they will add to your funding source. However, it's interesting that some of the districts who picked up a lot of funding on the DCD did not pick up money on the discretion. Some of the counties who lost on the DCD made up for it on the compression. So Palm Beach picked up $40 million on DCD, nothing on the compression. Dade up 24, nothing on the compression. Broward picked up 22, didn't pick up anything on the compression. For us, we didn't pick up anything on the compression, only lost 8 on the DCD. So we're not in this calculation too well. Biggest losers, Polk lost $16 million because of the DCD, okay? But they gained $33 million from the compression. So they're ahead. Marion lost 11 through the DCD, but picked up 9 on the compression. Volusia lost 9, gained 9, lost 4. So there's been talk of changing the DCD, modifying it, changing it. It's based on a 3-year average. One of the reasons they don't put teachers, I forgot to say that, there are no teachers within the positions within the DCD. It's all excludes all teaching positions. One of the reasons they do that is because they don't want any strong union to have a high influence on that DCD factor. So if you have a union that has a district has a strong union and they inflate those salaries, the DCD will go up. The DC goes up, then you get more than 1.0 on your base school allocation. So they eliminate that. Doesn't necessarily account for other unions that may be very strong in other districts. Once you impact one of these calculations, there's a factor you'll probably also impact another. What those others are, you don't know until the legislature starts looking at the calculation. Next discussion I want to go over lightly was ESSER funding. Right now there's 3 ESSER fundings. We call them ESSER 1, 2, and 3 for lack of better. For us, the district will get $3.4 million or did get $3.4 million for ESSER 1. ESSER 2 is about 13. ESSER 3 is about 30. They're all very similar as far as allowable expenditures. ESSER 1, we got 3.3, we've expended 3.1. So everything they said we could spend it on, we have. We spent 94% of it. 1.7 was for counselors, 800,000 for technology. Charter schools got a piece of 500,000, few indirect costs and some custodial supplies. But most of that money we've already captured from the state. ESSER 2, approximately 13 million. We get 11.6, charter schools get about 2. This one still is in formation. There's 4 major parts. There's 465,000 that's allocated to locate unaccountable students. We've located our unaccountable. There's 12 of them. Now we got to figure out what the state wants us to do with it. We have to do what we can to find them. Once we find them, we send some information to the state that hopefully we can say, okay, we have found them, they have relocated, they moved to another state, moved to another country, or we found them, they just enrolled late. Then the hope is that we can redirect that 465 to something else, that we don't have to give it back to the state. We don't know yet. 2.3 million is for learning losses. Focus of that, we're probably going to use that to help buy the teacher textbook adoption, soften the blow there. A little bit for technology, and then they have something called a lump sum advance. And that's exactly what it says in the statute, lump sum advance. Doesn't really say what you can't or can't spend it on. It's basically assumed you can spend it on for anything that's allowable services, of which we're going to primarily focus this on instructional materials and computer laptops and a few other items. Of that amount, they advanced us $6 million. We've already drawn down 5.2 of it, 85% of it. We try and draw down as much as they will allow us at any point in time as fast as we can before they, one, revert it somewhere else, or number two is just get that money in our bank fast and then build up our fund balance for a general fund. ESSER 1, I forgot to mention, expires of September of 22. ESSER 2 will expire September of 23, so we have plenty of time to spend the money. ESSER 3 will expire in September of 24. This is the most newest one. There's some information, but not a lot. It's about 30 million based on our preliminary calculations, 26 for us, 4 for charters. Allowable expenditures are very similar to all the other ESSERs. Learning losses, purchase of technology, mental health services, improved outdoor quality, and basically anything and everything necessary to maintain school operations. Still waiting on some information on this, and this has not been forthcoming. We had a few other grants, too, that are out there in the works. One of them is Florida Department of Health. We got advised that they had $4.2 million that was designated for schools. So we reached out to them. They have submitted the grant. We haven't heard back yet, so we're in a holding pattern. The things we put in that grant were counselors, psychologists, PP&E, some health assistants, and also the night misting for next year. If you also recall, we approximately got $1 million in from the county. That was toward December of last year. They hadn't spent all their money, and they had to do some quick maneuvering, so we went knocking on the door and said, we have some expenditures, can you help us out? Mr. Jason Brown was very kind, and we were able to put together a reimbursement sheet. Basically, that consisted of other health assistance through this year, 2021, bought a bunch of misting machines, extra hours for cleaning, PP&E, and also some subs for some teachers. The balance is a commixture of some what we call GEARS money, or money from the government, and also various other grants. Covered things for like additions to the CTE program, some additional sanitation and cleaning, rapid credentialing for TCTC, high quality reading, step into kindergarten, various other items of not quite as much money. Most of this money has been spent through this year. Touch a little bit on the 5-year plan. The numbers here and everything is a conversation to talk about where the 5-year plan is as of today, not the 5-year plan that you will be presented probably between now and September, which will bring your new year together, any changes in the projects. This will really just kind of give you an overview, big view of all your money. Where does it go? How do we spend it? Anything that's lacking, et cetera, just at a very high level. These are 5-year numbers, so approximately $200 million in revenue. You got to pay your debt first, just like you have to pay your mortgage payment. Then transfers to general to cover maintenance and property insurance, which is allowed by statute. Buy some portable leasings, which will go away once we build the addition. School buses, whenever we buy those. Technology, about $11 million for 5 years, about $2 million a year, and leaves the balance of about $80 million. So really, that's what goes back into your schools. That's what goes back to maintain your schools. That is approximately 2% of your asset value. You have about $700 million of buildings based on current replacement costs. That means you're spending 2% to maintain those. That equates to $12 million a year. Industry average is somewhere between 4 and 8. And that's not just to maintain, but also to enhance and improve. If you got a classroom that's 600-700 square feet, that really doesn't fit today's educational requirements. Also, the technology, the way we teach today, you don't quite have that structure at those schools. Projects. Currently today, this is where the bulk of the 5-year planning money goes. Heating and air conditioning is very important in the state of Florida, so about $20 million goes there. Maintenance on your schools, windows, doors, and et cetera, building envelopes, roofing, plumbing, security, all total about $80 million in some global pictures. Marquee signs. I'm happy to announce that through Nick, we have 9 schools that will have marquee signs installed before the end of the year. That'll be the last ones. All your other schools already have electronic marquee signs, so that'll take care of that. Also, we don't see it up there, but it is in the works. We are working on the playground initiative through Mr. Michaels. We started off with about $300,000 a year. We've doubled it to $600,000 a year. We went from 2 schools to 3 schools a year. 5-year expenditure is probably about $3 million. This will include inclusive playgrounds, resurfacing the productive ground, and adding shade. Energy costing, also another thanks to Mr. Bob Michaels. Average 23% reduction in savings in energy costs since 2012-13. This is primarily attributed to upgrading our AC chillers, automated building system controls, monitoring maintenance, the use of electricity and AC, and also upgrading our chillers maintenance program through Train AC. This is a good thing because Florida Power and Light is trying to impose an increase next year for the next 5 years. Next year's estimated increase is somewhere between 5% and 14%, depending on what the Public Service Commission agrees to. It has not been agreed to yet. It's still in discussion. Over the next 5 years, they want to increase it 18%. Some of the big reasons they want to increase it, one is they want to expand and build a brand new natural gas facility. They want to expand the use of solar powers and batteries. They also want to refurnish their infrastructure to avoid outages during the storms and just replace older equipment. Public Commission has not approved that yet. It is still on the docket for approval sometime later this year. Final slide is just to mention to the board the next final steps we have. Remember, July 20th, you'll approve the trim ads. That basically puts us in compliance with Department of Revenue so that we can impose our millage rates. 23rd, they'll be posted in the newspaper. 27th is when you come back and approve those tentative millage rates and tentative budget, and then the 9th we'll come back and approve the final budget and final millage rates. And that concludes my little presentation. Any questions?
Board members, anybody have a question from Mr. Fagan? Ms. Rosario, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan. Sitting with you is always an opportunity for learning, for me in particular. But I do have a few questions. One, can you allow the board publicly a brief explanation as to what our process is going to be between now and the time of our approving of our budget for next year? What does that look like? How will you explain the budget to us? And if you can take this opportunity to let the public know as well.
Yes, ma'am, through the chair. What will occur is we're currently almost done with what I call the backroom operations of preparing the budget. We've got the final numbers in based on the final conference from the state. We're finalizing the year in, which will therefore determine your roll forward for next year. The budgets for schools and divisions have been pretty much done. We're just putting the final touches in there. As far as on the payroll side, all your salary increases for next year based on any agreements have been taken care of and now on this payroll side. We will come to the 20th, and at the 20th, there will be a presentation as to that tentative budget. What does it look like? Are you increasing millage? Are you decreasing? Will you have an actual budget increase, as they call it? There will be the discussion line by each of the revenue sources, by schools and by divisions. What does their budget look like? Be at a high level as far as what the budget impact and down to each of the individual funds. At the 20th is when you approve the trim, which is in essence approving the tentative budget. Then you're approving the trim ads. Then we'll go to posting, and then on the 20th, we go through the process of actually following the script as approving all the millage rates and all the budget to meet trim requirements. So the 20th is really the discussion on the budget. The 27th is more of a formality of adopting it per trim. Then we'll take that budget and we'll finalize the year, determine all our final numbers, and then in September, we'll do another presentation very similar to that, but your numbers are going to be more final. In July, you just closed out the year, you're not done yet. Your millage rates won't change. You don't have to go back to the public and change your advertisements, but your numbers will move because you'll have final year-end numbers. Then we'll come to September, we'll set that in stone, and you'll approve those final millage rates. You really don't change the rates, you just readopt them, but your budget will slightly change.
Okay, thank you for that. Also, the premium holiday month to month, who determines that and when are we going to find out? Like, how does that actually affect?
To the board, that'll be an item that will be discussed at HITEF, and then we'll bring the recommendation to the board that basically says we're carrying a very high level fund balance. We don't want to use that fund balance to pay premium increases. We say, okay, I need 3% to maintain my revenue stream to meet my claims expenditures. You want to keep those even. If claims have been low, instead of reducing premiums, rates, you simply take a premium holiday, which basically nobody pays that day, and that money reverts back to your pocket and also reverts back to the district pocket. But we'll come to the board with a formal presentation as to what, where, and why we want to do that.
But you just said by the day. Is it going to be
Oh,
a discussion by the day or by the month?
Let me rephrase that. There'll be a discussion with HITEF, and then we'll come to the board to say we're looking to do a premium holiday, maybe December or January.
Okay. Interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of that.
It's
So
been
it's
discussed, but
interesting.
nothing formal yet. Because
Okay.
we want to wait to see how the year ends up.
Okay. And then my last question is about the marquees. I'm so glad that we're finally going to get these marquees up and running. It is, I mean, we have some schools I've mentioned on numerous occasions that just have these really, really awful marquees, to be honest with you. And it's just an eyesore. So you said by the end of this year, but is that this
This summer.
21 or 22
My understanding
year?
through this summer. They'll be
Through
done
this
summer.
summer, we're going to have 9 new marquees. Oh my gosh, this is like celebration.
Let me
Do we
double check.
have like ribbon cutting ceremonies for them? No, it's probably just a silly question.
I get the hint.
That's a good thing. Good, that's a good thing. All right, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Done? Anyone else?
Sure.
Okay. Dr. Schiff?
Yeah, not a huge amount, because just so the public knows, we've had many conversations about these before, so many of our questions have been answered and addressed in several prior meetings. So I'm just going to go through a couple things. On the Fitch rating, which has been moved from negative to stable, do you recall offhand how long we were sitting at negative and what it was before that?
Through the chair, the ratings were the same, but they had moved us from stable to negative. I don't have that exact date here with me, but your rating stayed the same. They just said your outlook, we're going to move you from stable to a negative. So the rating actually didn't change from Fitch.
And can you say a little bit about the impact of that for us and our financial stability and ability to move forward in financial decision-making?
When you go from a stable, you talk about go from a stable to negative or negative to stable?
Negative to stable.
When you go to negative stable, it improves your overall financial position within the community if you ever want to go borrow money. If you're at a negative, you can still borrow money because we're still investment grade, but you'll pay a little bit more because you've got that rating outlook from that bonding agency. Once you go to stable, then you make all the lenders feel a whole lot more comfortable, and it's a little bit easier to price your bonds and also attract more investors.
So for example, in the past, occasionally, we've had to go out for TANs in that moment. This would, if we were to ever have to do that again, this would improve our ability to get a TAN at a better rate if we were ever to have to do that. Is that true?
Through the chair, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Couple other things. So I just want to, because the premium holiday, which I think is a great idea, because one of the things I want to also just so that people are aware, because there's often confusion about our fund balance. And so while it is board policy to maintain that at 5%, sometimes over time it's higher than that to allow for unforeseen expenses. sometimes that comes up in negotiations in other places as, well, why are we not spending down that money? And so one of the things, so I just want to clarify that that money is one-time only money. And we never would want to commit that to recurring expenses, which is why a premium holiday like this gives some money back in teacher and staff pockets without making it a recurring expense. And I'm assuming that's the logic behind it.
To the chair, that is an excellent example.
And so when we are, because on the one hand, we want money in that, like anybody wants reserve money in their bank account for unforeseen emergencies. But we also don't want to be carrying too much in there when we could be using it on things that we need in the district.
Through the chair, yes, ma'am. There's a fine line between carrying too much fund balance and spending your fund balance one time, and now you have a funding cliff. I'd much rather be in a position of saying, well, yes, we didn't spend $20 million, but all the bills have been paid, and we're going to see about spending that on one-time items, not reoccurring items that the suit may deem as appropriate for the schools. To spend it on reoccurring means at some point in time in the future, you're going to have a funding cliff, and now you're going to have to make budget cuts. Because once that money goes away, you don't get it back.
Do you have any idea what the cost of that premium holiday would be to the district?
Approximately $1 million. The savings, we wouldn't pay $1 million in premiums that month.
Right, so $1 million would in effect be a transfer back to employees
Yes.
of that fund
Yes.
balance.
Everybody
And what
shares
is
it.
it common, so while we, so policy says we have to maintain a 5% balance.
Mm-hmm.
Legally, we have to maintain a 3% balance. What is standard industry practice or school district practice for a running fund balance?
All right, through the chair, let me clarify one point. You have insurance fund balance and you have general fund balance.
General fund.
They're separate.
Let me clarify, general fund.
So on the fund balance for insurance fund, it's based on safe harbor. Got to have 3 months of claims
Yes.
premiums. That's taken care of, we're okay. On the fund balance side, it all depends on the county you're in. Some counties will run as much as a 30% ending fund balance down to less than 3%, in which case the state comes knocking. It all depends upon basically the initiatives that are put in that year. Sometimes districts will front-load initiative for the entire, say, a 3-year period, but they're only going to spend a third of it in the first year. Well, that money's going to roll at the end of the year and make it look like you've got an artificial ending fund balance when really you don't. If you fund it at the thirds, then maybe that'll maybe change the way your presentation is at the end of the year. But statute by state law is you got to have 5% budgeted and you have to end above 3%. For us, we have a budgeted 5% requirement. But the gauntlet runs all through the district, all through the state of Florida.
Do you have any sense of what we typically carry?
We used to carry 23 million, and now we're down to about 11 to 12, so we're carrying right about 10 to 11%.
Thank you. I assume that when, on the 20th, we see, and I know that before we share it publicly, we'll have a lot of interaction about this, but that when the final, the tentative budget is shared on the 20th, that we will also see specifically how that's aligned to the strategic plan in each individual, either line item or category.
To the chair, yes, ma'am.
And I assume that before that, we'll have opportunity to engage and comment and reflect on that.
To the chair, yes, ma'am.
I don't know if this is necessarily a good idea, but I'm going to put it out there as a possibility because obviously, other than these settings, board members can't talk to each other. And I'm wondering if it may or may not be productive to have something where board members can actually engage on that together in addition to our one-on-one. We don't have to decide that now. I'm just putting it out as a possibility that we may want to consider talking about.
And just to give a level of assurance, when we will also be having the strategic plan conversation, which drives the budget. So when we look at the priorities for strategic plan, what we accomplished, where we need to modify, and setting goals for the upcoming school year, that gives direction in terms of where we're going to fill in the holes based on our priorities aligned to the strategic plan. So I think that conversation will take place with the strategic plan being the driving force.
And when are we having that conversation?
Next time we come together.
Excellent, thank you. The DCD, which I'm intrigued by, as you know, because we had conversations about this. I'm intrigued by, and I know you put together some data on this. I'm intrigued by that some districts, I understand the logic of some districts get more money back than they send up, some less, as an idea of equalizing resources across the state. Totally understand that. What I don't quite understand is how, and using Martin as an example, right? Comparable district in many ways, right? Comparable student size, comparable employee, all of that, and I get, and you said it's not based on cost of living, it's based on cost of of services, wages in the district. Can you say a little more, I don't know if you can explain this well, or if it bears explaining, but while we're losing 8,000, which is not a crisis by any means, but they're getting 1.5 million, right? Almost 1.6 million. Osceola, which is a much larger district, is getting almost 14 million. How is it that we don't come out ahead in this, and is this something in the future that we can either advocate for, or it would be a legislative or other priority for us? Because while we're not coming out significantly behind in terms of actual dollars, we do come out behind other districts, and I would love us not to.
Through the chair, you talked about Martin. Martin's last 3-year averages have been 1.02. So that tells me that based upon the jobs that they're looking at, it costs 2% more to hire them in Martin County than it does here. So to get you grounded on why, we're at basically 100 or 0.99. So the job over there in Martin cost 1% or 2% more than to hire the same guy here. That's why they get the more. We don't. To another county, it actually costs less. Baker County is 0.96. So they're saying it even costs, for $10, it only cost him $9.60, but in Martin County, it cost him $11 to hire the same individual. That's driving your price level index.
Got it. So to put it in its simplest terms, for us to hire the services that we need in the district, they say it costs us less, and they give that district another, whatever, 1.5 or $6 million,
Correct.
because that money will go directly into providing the services that the district needs in order to support the buildings, the teachers, whatever are the other resources.
Now, I did speak to Mr. Dewey. He's the gentleman who prepares this for the state, and there are some improvements that could be made into this to smooth this out. Me and him talked about some of them, but they have not yet been presented to legislators in order to make this more comparable and to make it more equitable across. But then if you impact Dade negatively and impact us positively, then you'll have that front.
Right.
So it's a tough decision.
Yeah, thank you, but that's helpful to understand how the process works.
Good.
Last question. The 80 million, wherever that was.
Capital fund based leftover for facilities.
Yes, that 80 million. We had talks recently about the master plan, right? The overall master plan and the need to closely examine the state of our facilities and our buildings. Is there this 80 million supports what we are already planned to do. How does it relate with the master planning moving forward, if at all?
Through the chair, the master plan basically outlined what they call a facility condition index. And this basically goes in and looks at the facility condition, not the functional use of it, not the educational use of it, simply the functional use. The windows work, the AC works, the computers have electricity, the roof doesn't leak, and the windows don't leak. Based overall for our district, we had a very low FCI, which meant that facility condition index, which meant that Bob and his team has done a very good job of maintaining our facilities. But he's maintaining what's there. We're not doing a whole lot of improvements. Like the next biggest improvement is the classroom addition at Sebastian River Middle to replace portables. There's a couple other cafeteria plans, but as far as going in and remodeling a whole school to bring it up to maybe a different standard for innovation in teaching, that's not in the plan because most of your funds that you have left are to maintain that low FCI, make sure everybody's safe, make sure all your fire alarms work, your sprinkler system's working, and your doors are locked. We're improving in our access control system. So you don't have a lot left over to make those kind of enhancements, but your condition of your schools are in very good shape. The master plan confirmed that. But the master plan said if you want to make any major renovations or improvements, instructions and systems and innovations in teaching, you
You're gonna
might
need more
need a
than
little
80
bit more of
million.
an investment.
Yeah, okay, got it. Thank you, that's it.
Hey, Dr. Jones.
Very excited that RSCA went well.
Microphone. Your microphone.
Be gone in 10 years. I know we had a good negotiation with IRCEA. We're working now with CWA. I hope that continues. As we know, CWA personnel, they really never left us during the COVID, made sure our schools were okay. Always going to look at extended day and $1 million, but I believe what we're doing there, Mr. Meyer shared earlier about maybe some of those teachers getting raises or teacher assistants, and really looking at the strategic plan and how that can help us with these students in extended day. Mr. Fagan, what's your biggest concern when ESSER funding is gone?
Through the chair, case in point, this year we had a slight dip in FEFP funding. If the state had not done that and basically cut us $5 million, then we would have had to use ESSER funding to balance that hole, which meant we would have been dependent on the following year, what did the state do? If ESSER funding lasts 2 or 3 or 4 years, then we're saying, okay, we have a safety net, we can maintain. But I don't get to do any of the new stuff that we really need to do at the schools. I don't get to build up that fund balance to slowly bleed that off of the next 5 or 6 years to help fund instruction adoption and the refresh of all the computers at the schools. It's been several years. Most of our laptops for students, except for the Chromebooks bought last year, were somewhere between 5 and 7 years of age. Normal refresh cycle is either 3 to 5. Without that infusion of cash, we would still probably be behind that 8 ball a little bit. Something would have having to give on the capital plan to fund that, and now your FCI might slowly creep up. You might do some preventative maintenance that you need to do. You might have some chillers go down because you won't have that capital infusion. With this, I feel more comfortable that we'll be able to get to most of those items, and just dependent on the economy and the Floridas and the legislature as to what they give us in the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay. I like the fact that you're bringing principals back into the budget. Question, at the end of the year, if they have anything in discretionary, does it roll over into their budget?
Through the chair, no, ma'am.
Okay. So they have to spend it?
Through the chair, yes, ma'am.
I love the fact that when you look at the SAM model, and it doesn't fit or it doesn't work, we look at it, for example, with VPK self-care, and I think that's a good thing to always take a look at it. $465,000 to find students. If we didn't use that money to find students for ESSER, could we use it in a different area?
Through the chair, I've already sent communication to DOE asking that same question. We've identified it. We have to report in September where they are, but then the language gets kind of lax, so I don't know yet. They haven't released that RFA yet as to what we have to do with the funds. Hopefully, we can retract that and use it elsewhere.
And just one last statement. We've talked a little bit individually about our lot in South County. Is that going to be involved when we talk about the budget and what we do with it and so forth?
The lot, the Oslo land for sale, is a topic for discussion, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Barefoot, would you like to ask any questions?
No, thanks, I'm good.
You're
I
good.
got all mine answered one-on-ones.
Okay, thank you. Most of my questions were asked, so I appreciate that. I want to go back to the TAN 1 second because you know how I feel about the TAN. The bond rating, thank you, from going to negative to stable, not only does it allow us to, I believe the comment was made, instead of a TAN, or I'm sorry, because of that bond rating, we could go for a TAN, but because of that bond rating, we could also take out a loan because instead of a TAN, is that correct?
To the chair, yes, ma'am.
So that's an option, board members, instead of a TAN, just throwing out there. The food service, great job. Extended day, awesome. I'm glad to see all those positives instead of negatives, especially in a year like we've had this year. Pre-K numbers, you said something about pre-K, and if those numbers go up, we have money in reserve. What exactly were you referring to?
Through the chair, the pre-K really didn't have a SAM model that said, based on your number of students you have and their exceptionality, how many do you need in order to support the team? And so toward the middle of last year, there became a need that there was too many students and not enough staff. So we went in, we looked at it, we added some in order to equalize that out. And then we looked at the model and said, where are you going to think you're going to be next year? Same thing with Sam. Where are you going to be with FTE? Well, if I grow here A, B, and C, I'm probably going to need another staff member. So we said, okay, let's put that in the model, but we're going to reserve it. Once you hit that level of FTE in those classes, then it's already been budgeted, and all we have to do is release the funds and staff the position. It's just a contingency fund, very similar to the period 12 position, the 8 period day positions. We have it in the budget, so we don't have to go looking for the funds. Just once the need is determined by the SUP and other cabinet members, it's already there. All we do is release the position.
Right. I guess, I don't know if that's changed or different, or because I was in a different county, but I know in my school, when I was a principal of the pre-K classrooms, and I had 4 of them, we had a number, it was 22 or 25 to 2. Is that not changed?
Through the chair, I'll have to get that back to you, but the main reason these positions were added were ESE pre-K.
Okay. So ESE
Not
is different
ESE
because of the
pre-K.
IEPs?
Absolutely.
Okay, what the IEP drives personnel?
Correct. That's what
Okay.
these additions were for, not for the normal pre-K.
So this is
ESE.
ESE pre-K?
Yes, ma'am.
Not VPK?
Correct.
Thank you for
Sorry,
that
my mistake.
clarification. That answers my question. Thank you.
Sorry.
Next item?
All right, thank you, Mr. Fagan, which is just want to take the time to thank him and Kim and team. Just absolutely outstanding work ensuring that our strategic plan is funded and we're able to do the things that we're able to do. And your next item, sir.
Next item is for contracts. We've discussed this a couple of times, but they are on the agenda for tonight. We have 3 items for purchase of laptops. The first one is to purchase approximately 5,000 laptops for our senior grade levels, 9 through 12. It's approximately $380 per unit. If you remember, we bought middle school laptops last year, starting the refresh cycle. This is part of an ongoing program in order to build the capital plan to put money away every year so that when we get ready to spend $3 million on laptops, we've got over half of it or more than half of it already put away in a holding account. And then the following year, you just have to add the difference. This basically puts the district on a 5-year refresh cycle for student laptops. We did middle, we're going to do high school, and the next level will be elementary. Next item we also have with our teachers. They have a lot of outdated units. This is a phrase to bring them up to speed of approximately 1,200 units, about $1.2 million. Their cost is a little bit more. It's approximately $1,000 per unit. Same scenario. A lot of the units were 5 to 7 years old, antiquated, were not mobile. Now we're going to give them laptops to make them more mobile to move within the classroom. Final item was the purchase of Dell Purchase Network Storage Solutions. We have a lot of servers out in the schools to provide services to the schools. They were getting old and antiquated and end of life. This is to bring them up to speed, approximately $300,000.
Okay. Any questions, board members? I do have one. With Chromebooks, I know that Chromebooks have issues with Zoom. There have been some things that have come up over the last year. We've been able to see that because of everything happening on Zoom. Do we have problems with it with Teams? Because I think that's what we would have to use, right? No problems with Teams? Okay, thank you. That's my question. Mr. Barefoot, are you good? Any questions? You're good. Okay, moving on.
Next item is the lobbyist agreement with Rutledge. It's approximately $7,000 a year. We just want to bring it to the board's attention that this is an evergreen contract. It renews automatically at the July of every year. They were at one point in time Mixon and Associates, and in February of 2017, there was an assignment to the contract over to Rutledge. We've been using their services since then. My involvement with them, they have been very good about pushing out information, answering questions. Mr. Jim Hamilton is on their team. He has been with the districts in the state of Florida a long time, knows a lot of history, has a lot of contacts at the state. Anytime we have any questions regarding funding or FEFP, he's a good source to kind of go back into that history. He can tell us a lot of things from the past that you can't find too much of. From my perspective, we've used them very well, and they've been very supportive in our questions and responses.
And just to build on that, we've been able to really build a strong relationship over the last, I would say, 6 months when we first looked at this, being very intentional on receiving the information from them to help drive our agenda, and we're looking forward to continue to build that relationship to drive a true legislative package moving forward.
Yes, Dr. Schiff, go ahead.
So some people will recall that when this came to us a little bit ago, there was some concern that we had contracted with a group that we were not aware we had contracted with, that reports were not reaching the board, that they may have been reaching Mr. Fagan, and that there was a history during which some things had shifted in our relationship with Rutledge Yesenia. At that time, I was not overly in favor of continuing that contract. I was irritated by the fact that it seemed like we were paying for a service that we as board members who should have been receiving that information were not. That said, since then, now that we are, and so, not only are we now receiving the information, and I agree with you, it's been helpful and it's been supportive. At FSBA a couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to spend some time with, I'm going to kill her last name, Jessica, help me.
Yeah.
Okay. Jessica Janisowicz, I can't say her last name. I'm sorry, Jessica, if you're watching this. But I had a chance to, I know she's not. I had a chance to spend some time with her and to actually ask some of those questions, to directly say, why was this happening? How was it happening? What is the history of it? And I got a far better understanding than I previously had about some of the history of events and what happens as to why we were not receiving that information. That said, in the time I got to spend with her and the information we're now receiving, my faith is restored. I know that Mr. Bass, who's nodding, had encouraged us. He had worked with them previously and had encouraged us to keep that relationship. And I have to say at that time, I was not in support of that. Since then, I would say they've won back my trust. I think the reports are helpful. I learned a lot from Jessica when I was able to speak with her one-on-one. I understood the relationship better, and I would say that now I'm in support of it. So that's my 2 cents.
Anyone else? No? Yeah, I agree with you. I was very concerned because when a superintendent asks them to stop communicating with the board, and the contract is with the board, then my question, I guess, to them is, why did they stop that?
Do you want to know the
Yes,
answer? Because I asked that question.
I would like to know that.
Sure. The answer that I got was that information that was legally and contractually being provided to the district and to this board was being shared outside of the board in ways that were not part of that contract and were not permissible. And I don't want to say more. So
they just stopped sending it?
So no, it was just not being sent directly to board members. It was still being sent.
Okay.
So at that, so I didn't have this conversation with Jessica, but we will recall that we went through a lot of changes in our finance department.
Right.
And so information that had been going to the previous finance department, we're not quite sure, where, when, how all of that happened. Much of it was before our time and then in the beginning of our time here. The information, I believe, went to finance, which I think there was a long period when there was a gap, and it may have reached the superintendent, but there was not a whole lot of clarity. There were reasons why it had stopped coming from the board. Previous board members had been sharing that information in ways that shouldn't have been happening with outside groups who were not privy to the information that we had contracted to receive.
Understood.
So that was why some of that had happened and had stopped coming to the board. Once those board members were no longer here, once we had reconstructed the finance department, we had a new superintendent, we have a new CFO, those relationships redeveloped and reemerged to the point where we now have and are getting the information that we should.
Okay. And I'm glad to hear what your comments too. It's not just, us getting in updates as to what's happening up in Tallahassee, but also helpful for you for financial reasons. So I appreciate that. All right, moving on.
I'll now turn it over to Mr. Meyer.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Dr. Moore. I have a few items, not that many, of either contracts or agreements that I will go over, and we can stop after each one to answer any questions for the board. The first of which is Lexia Learning. Lexia Learning is an online literacy support that we will use to provide intensive reading intervention to students in grades K through 8. We were granted through the CARES an opportunity to procure this and pilot this in a number of our districts this year, and the teachers and administrators reported tremendous success. It did make it to the approved list of intensive interventions from the state, so we're bringing that to utilize in all of our elementary and middle schools next year, and so that is the item. Questions there? Great. All right, move on to Renaissance. Mayan, as you may recall, during the pandemic, we were given an opportunity from a number of vendors to pilot things for free, one of which was Mayan Reader. It does pair with the Accelerator Reader, and that enabled our students to check out books essentially online or just read through a number of titles, and the usage was through the roof, of course, right? We were away from schools, students weren't able to come in and check out physical books, but they were able to continue reading while they were at home, and so we made the recommendation to procure this in the past school year, the 2020-2021 school year, and because we understood that we'd have a number of students staying home through the pandemic. What we actually found was that even the students that were in brick and mortar were using this at a tremendous rate. It wasn't just the students that are on transitional and virtual, but it was being used by all of our students, and at such a high usage, the teachers and coaches asked us if we would renew that, and so we've placed that in the budget and are requesting to approve that again for another school year. There are some things we do want to continue to build on with this. We want to be more intentional in the books that we're recommending the students to read, because it will enable us to track their progress and make sure they're reading the right sort of titles that align with the standards in the commissioner's book list. But yeah, it was great success this past year, and recommend bringing that back again for another year. Questions about Mile? No? Okay. All right. The third item is with the the Environmental Learning Center. Unfortunately, last year we were not able to get back to a place where we were able to resume field trips, but next year we anticipate that is going to be corrected, moving into a better sense of normalcy. So we do want to plan for our students to be able to resume attending that field trip at the Environmental Learning Center to get a hands-on experience with the wonderful things that go on in the Indian River Lagoon. We did make sure that, the students that may not have had this opportunity, we think that, onesies and twinsies maybe, but for the most part, all of our students will be able to say that they were able to have this experience because it is for 2 years. And by 2 years, I mean 2 grade levels, right? So we're capturing 2 grade levels at a time. So while a portion of our kids were not able to make it through it, the year that was partially interrupted and no one was able to go this year, given the fact that we're doing 2 grade levels, we're confident that 99-point-something% of the students will be able to look back on their elementary experience in Indian River County and will be able to remember this wonderful opportunity. So that is the item. All right. The next two are agreements with the Early Learning Coalition. The first of which is with our voluntary pre-K program that was aforementioned, to assure that the district has all their T's crossed and I's dotted to be reimbursed from the Early Learning Coalition for our provision of services for voluntary pre-K at our sites. It's a standard template that comes from the State Office of Early Learning that each provider, whether public or private, enters into with their respective local Early Learning Coalition, a standard item that you would see each year. So there's not too much special or new about this one. It's a procedural item. And then the next is the contract with the Extended Day with the Early Learning Coalition. There are opportunities through the Early Learning Coalition for our Extended Day program to offer a reduced fee for students whose families qualify financially. That enables us to subsidize that cost. As aforementioned, we're doing some things to reduce costs to multiple different families with our Extended Day program given the budget surplus, but this is certainly an item that we want to continue to draw down those funds from the Early Learning Coalition because it does enable us to provide a better rate for many of our families. And then finally, the Extended Day program, given the surplus, is able to make donations back to their respective schools. Tremendous work by that team this year in making the Extended Day programs themselves more academically oriented, which was something that we have been looking to do for a number of years. But even with that, there is an opportunity here to donate funds back to the respective schools that will enable the principals to target academic support in other areas and enrichment in other areas that will support the students at those respective school sites. So that is the item as a donation from the extended day to our elementary schools.
Okay, any comments or questions, board members?
Just thank you on the extended day and helping out, giving money back to schools and making sure we're using our time there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I mean, the credit goes to the team. They've done a tremendous job. I mean, just like everyone else in the entire district, their hearts went into this, supporting the kids throughout the pandemic, and they deserve a lot of credit.
Thank you.
Also, I wanted to say thank you for making sure that all the kids got to go to the ELC. I know that was a big cost, but I think in the past, when board members have asked for things and later on, a couple months later, we either forget about it or forget to keep nagging you about it, it's nice to have you put it down and actually do it and nag us about it. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Once again, the credit goes to Ms. Becerra and other folks. They did a great job of looking into that.
And if you've not been on that field trip, I would suggest
gonna
you
go.
go. It really is educational for you.
Just very appreciative of Mr. Meyer and his team. As you all know, the summertime in a district office for curriculum instruction is the absolute busiest time. For us, more now so than ever as it relates to our curriculum adoption. But as you can see, Mr. Meyer continue, along with his team, to develop professional developments, a plethora of development going on over the course of the summer, all top quality in terms of summer programming, happening without a hitch. Try to spend every Monday starting in a school with kids. So the volume of work is absolutely tremendous, but the quality of work is even better. So very proud of, with everything that's going on in CNI, continuing to deliver on our strategic plan and the initiatives identified within. So thank you, Mr. Meyer and team. As he continues to say, it's all about the team. And now we transition to Ms. Dampier.
Good afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon through the chair. I have 7 contracts on the board agenda tonight. The first one is the renewal of the 3-year hosting agreement with Power Schools. This assessment is our data management system that we use to house all of our assessment data. We also do our scoring and creating and delivering of our unit assessments in this platform. So we're very pleased to have that being renewed tonight.
Ms. Stampier, can you tell us the former name for Power School?
The 3.
I know.
Every year, it was Unify.
Unify,
Before
that's what
that,
it
it was Performance Matters. So
Yeah,
they've
because
had
somebody had
several-
asked me, why are we changing from Unify? We didn't. Okay.
We have not. It's the same platform. They just keep changing, I guess,
Yeah.
names. But this is where all of our teachers do their data meetings, and our principals, they use this platform quite a bit to make data-driven decisions for our students. The next item I have on the agenda, we have 3 contracts that are renewals. We have Saveus, Edgenuity, and Florida Franchise virtual contract. This will be an option for SDIRC teachers to continue a virtual platform through Indian River Virtual School if enrollment supports this need. At this time, we do not have the need at this time, but of course, we have a couple of more months to go. These platforms provides a 180-day comprehensive full-time or part-time program for our students and for our teachers to log on to. Are there any questions about that?
What are your numbers right now, and what numbers do you need to get to?
Currently, we have 0 for this particular, that would fall up under this particular franchise. We have 58 students who are in our virtual option that we have, which would be full-time. We have 0 part-time, but that's not unusual. Those are well within the numbers that we've had in the past. But we thought we would have more parents choosing the option to have students access this platform, and right now we have 0
Okay, thank you.
as of Monday.
And we have to provide 3 platforms, correct?
Yes, we do. We have to offer the 3 platforms, and the parents choose and select. And we want to make sure that they have those options. So those 3 platforms were Savas, Edgenuity, and Florida Franchise. Then we have the next 3 contracts, which are external teachers that we've been using in the past, which is our renewal of K through 12 Stride and Florida Virtual VIP virtual contract, as well as the Edgenuity VIP virtual contract. And again, this program will allow our students to access the teachers from this contract, as well as access the curriculum from this contract as well. And it's a 180-day comprehensive full-time program. Are there any questions? Okay, I have one more item on the agenda, and that is the entitlement grants. Currently, we have 10 entitlement grants. We're very excited about this, and we are awarded in the amount of $11,648,672.31. Out of these 10 contracts, 7 are from the Curriculum and Instruction Department, which consists of our title grants. We have Title I, Part A, which is improving the academic achievement of the disadvantaged. We all know that that's in our Title I schools. Title I, Part C is the Migrant Children's Grant. We have Title II, Part A, which is our PD grant, which is supporting effective instruction. Then we have Title III, which is our supplementary instructional support for our ELLS learners. We have Title IV, which is fairly new. A couple of years ago, we got that for supporting student support and academic enrichment. We have the Carl Perkins grant, and then we have the computer science grant from CNI. The last 3 grants are from my office, and it is the IDA grant, which we're very excited about to continue that. And then we have the IDA grant for pre-K, which we renew every year, as well as the mental health assistance allocation. And again, most of the grants are used to fund salaries, as well as resources and services to improve student achievement. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Dampier. The next item on the agenda belongs to me. It is the Safer at School Plan. As you know, Board Member Berenborg brought an item several months ago to bring a plan on June 22nd, which is today's workshop, regarding our Safer at School Plan. Prior meetings allowed us to move to a mass optional environment 2 board meetings ago. So what this document is basically the first reading. I'll continue to update it. It is not up for approval tonight, just review during today's workshop. Some of the highlights in this document ensures that we're transitioning back to the normal brick and mortar experience. As Ms. Dampier said, we have about 83 kids in our virtual environment right now. I think we have had a very successful transition back to brick and mortar. We were anticipating, as I've mentioned at previous board meetings, expanding our virtual programming, even allocating a principal and assistant principal if needed. Right now, that need is not there. Our parents and our students are trusting us back in our brick and mortar experience, so it's very, very encouraging for us. So we'll have the regular brick and mortar experience as well as the virtual model where Ms. Holden is doing some absolutely great work. We will continue to have the face covering optional policy in all areas of the school. Right now in summer school, we included the bus as a mask requirement. We'll move to a masking option, being optional there as well. At the beginning of the school year, we will include training, intentional around ensuring any individual in our campuses are not mask shaming or understanding if a child wears to or not to wear a mask, that we are being very appropriate of the decision that those parents are making. We will continue back at a volunteer mentor program will be open to their campuses. Field trips will continue. Face-to-face orientations will take place. So this is just the aligning of our Safer at School plan. We will continue to do the cleaning in the evening, as Mr. Fagan mentioned in his presentation. The water bottles, the systems that we put in will remain there. So we have a nice transition. So very, very proud of the transition that we've made moving into our summer school. We did that relatively quickly, but it has been extremely successful. As a community, we continue to march down the level of concern as it relates to the CDC. So the only thing that would necessarily be pending here would be the latest information as it relates to quarantine. Even in quarantines over our summer programming, which, as you know, has 3 times as many students as in previous years, we've only had 2 to date. So we're seeing a very steady implementation. In summer school, we're very encouraged that we're going to be able to open school in a very safe and effective way based on this plan. So as I said, not up for approval, but I wanted to have the board provide feedback if needed in this first reading.
Board members, anyone like to ask a question or make a comment?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for this. Originally, the discussion was to make, to have buses, as you mentioned, where students would wear the masks throughout the summer, but I'm very glad that we are not going to enforce that on the buses, and this is a step in the right direction, so thank you.
Mr. Barefoot, are you good? Two things that I wanted to point out. The return of visitors. It's really been a loss not to have so many volunteers on our campus this past year, and I know we will see that when we see scores coming back, but I welcome the fact that we're going to be able to have all that support back again, so that's wonderful. The other thing that I don't see in here, and I'm glad I don't see it in here, is anything that has to do with vaccinations. And so we have not made a statement about that, but would you like to make a statement about that?
So I think of the health department in terms of vaccinations and providing the opportunity for us, I think they were very amenable to providing opportunities for our faculty in terms of students. If that's something a family or parents would like to make that decision, there's no lines, no waiting in order to receive those vaccinations.
Right, but we're not going to require vaccinations.
No,
And we're not going to
we-
mention
no,
that. We're
no.
not going to talk about whether or not kids have a vaccination card or not. I want to make that very clear, that that's not going to happen.
Correct.
Thank you.
Just one comment. Thank you again for adding in there about mask shaming, because I want to make sure our students, staff, administrators, everyone, if they choose to wear a mask, that's a choice, and we need to support that.
Absolutely.
All right,
All right,
thank
our
you.
next item is a update on the Education Foundation. Early in January, we brought an item to create policy which would initiate the creation of our own foundation. Shortly after that, I had the opportunity to meet with the Ed Foundation currently in Indian River County, and Mr. Herring, who is here today. We had a really good conversation about the systems and support that are available through the current Ed Foundation. And as I was researching the creation of our own foundation and the complexity of what would need to be in place, the manpower that would need to be in place, the level of liability that we would need to cover, in meeting with Mr. Herron, I saw opportunities for us to maximize partnerships. We have probably one of the most aggressive strategic plans that I think any system has ever created. As you know, this board approved a strategic plan that puts us in the top 10 rankings, even in the midst of a pandemic. So we approved that strategic plan in the midst of a pandemic. And the data that we have available to us right now, which is only third grade, and we'll speak in more about this evening, says that this district is setting itself apart in terms of academic outcomes based on this aggressive strategic plan, and we all should be proud. But Mr. Herring offered his services, and in looking at how do we take the foundation that currently exists, identify what are the needs based on this board's priorities aligned to our strategic plan, define those priorities, and allow the Ed Foundation to continue some of the great fundraising and initiatives and programs that they're currently doing, but at the same time be strategic to support our strategic plan. And I tasked Ms. Cindy Emerson to say, please work with Mr. Herron, see what are the possibilities. So we've had a number of fruitful conversations on how we would leverage this partnership, ensuring that we can continue to fund or use supplemental funds to really build some of the things that we want. Some of the initiatives that Mr. Fagan just mentioned in terms of building innovative classrooms. There are opportunities for partnership. This board drives the priorities defined within our strategic plan, and the Ed Foundation can be the partner that ensures that we continue to fund those unique initiatives, because we all know the state of Florida is not going to fund public education the way we would need it to be funded, and through partnerships, I believe we can do some powerful work. I asked Mr. Herron and Ms. Emerson to quickly review what we're envisioning here for our board.
Here we go. To the board, I'm very excited to be here today to talk through some of the initiatives that Mr. Herron and I have worked very closely on. I don't know if when he took over the role as executive director of the Ed Foundation, he knew he would be spending so much time working with the district, aligning the strategic plan to initiatives and pillars. But it has been such a joy to work with Mr. Herron and the board of the Ed Foundation. And they have been nothing but genuine and sincere in their intentions to support the school district and our strategic plan and guiding principles. So I just want to walk you through very quickly with Mr. Herron where we see this going and share the excitement with the community as we continue to strengthen the relationship. So we have our school board working stronger together with our community partnerships and in ways that are really aligning proactively what our district goals are to what the needs of our system is. And so with the Ed Foundation, they currently have 8 members of their board. They're looking to expand and diversify their board even further. And then as you can see on the bottom there, we have Mr. Herron showing his support for the school district of Indian River County and our initiatives and guiding principles. We've spent a lot of time together really making sure that the guiding principles drive the work of the Ed Foundation and the funding. What I want you to know is that the Ed Foundation has over 30 years of support in nonprofit for the school district. And they have been open, whether it's with the high impact grants or our science fair, in wanting our support and wanting our feedback in the programs that they're doing. In fact, we saw a 33% increase this year in high impact grants. I had the pleasure of sitting with the committee and helping them determine which of the projects that were presented really aligned to the school district, the school's choice theme, and the intention of the principals at each school, which was unique. That has not happened in the past, from my understanding, and really helped in making sure that the projects that should be prioritized were. And so with these guiding principles, we are looking with a unified mission to bring the big ideas to positively impact our students' lives, really focusing in on innovation, development, equity, access, and support. And so with these guiding pillars, we will see that we can continue to move forward, but do it in a way that is proactive, constantly meeting together with the joint committee with the Ed Foundation to ensure that what we're doing and what our purpose is with the district aligns. And so what we'll see is a pillar of innovation where the trademarks of the Ed Foundation are not lost in this, and that was something that Doug and I both agreed were important to hold value to what was currently taking place with the Ed Foundation, but to then add in areas where we can really get philanthropic support that are guided to what our needs are as a district. So as you can see, the high impact grants, the science and engineering fair, they will continue to be supported through the Ed Foundation under the pillar of innovation, with the guiding principle of engaging in innovative practices to optimize outcomes. When we look at development, we're really looking in at staff development and facility development. So this allows us to get continued support as we continue to progress and bring innovation to the district to ensure that our staff development also aligns with that and our facilities continue to improve and grow as a result of school choice themes and the innovative practices principals are bringing in. The pillar of equity will allow us to continue focusing in on Step Into Kindergarten. We know that that is a big priority of the school district, and the Ed Foundation has always been a huge support of that and providing technology equity across our district for students. Under the pillar of access, this will allow us to continue with some of the trademark programs that the Ed Foundation is known for, whether it's Sneaker Exchange or the Vision to Reading program, but also give opportunities if students want to participate in extracurricular activities or athletic programming, that not having equipment would never be a barrier. This will allow us to have funding put aside to support all students with all access to programs, as well as enrichment experiences. One of the things that Doug and I had talked about in pretty good length was ensuring if students want to participate in field trips that the income of a family should never determine whether a student can participate. This will allow us to raise funds through the Ed Foundation to support all students. For the pillar of support, this would allow us to continue with the Ed Foundation Adopt a Class and Fund a Project program and add on the AIM advocacy program. This is an initiative that is under the Student Services Program. We worked with Dr. Packard, and we really hope to be able to have some financial assistance for our mentors to ensure that as they're working with students one-on-one, those students get access to anything that they need that might help them to find the success that we know that they can have. And then finally, it all goes back to our district strategic plan. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to Executive Director Doug Heron, who, by the way, is a former educator and principal himself. And so he really does understand the need that we have in our district and the support that we need.
Thank you, Cindy. And I will ask you in advance to forgive me if I miss out on protocol. I'm supposed to say to the board, right? So, or to the chair. So forgive me in advance if I get excited and miss some of that protocol. I am excited to be here today, and I'm very excited that we're moving in this direction, our foundation with the school district. When I took over, and I don't want to repeat a story that probably everyone has heard, when I took over in March of 2020, I can usually just say that date and everybody understands. But a week after taking over, I was told to start working at home. I really didn't know why, since I was the only one in the office at the time. But for a period of time, I worked from home. And one thing in addition to that, if I'm quite honest, when I took over, there was quite a bit of turnover at the Education Foundation. Most of the board members, in addition to obviously the executive director of 16 years moving in another direction, most of the board that had any kind of organizational knowledge had resigned as well. So it was a big learning curve, not only for me, but for my board as well. We were down to 5 board members. So since then, we have expanded, and we're looking to expand more to not only make our board larger, but to diversify it and provide opportunities for every segment of the population in Indian River County. But I did notice early on that the relationship with the district seemed to be strained, and I think it's fair to say there was probably some culpability on the part of both. I believe Dr. Moore had only started his position maybe 5 or 6 months prior to my arrival, so it was new things. 2 months, okay, so yeah, just a couple of months. So new things were happening in the school district, and I will say, looking back now, good new things in the school district were happening, and new things were happening with us as well. And, add in a year of not being able to really see anybody in person and meet anyone. It hampered our fundraising efforts. It hampered almost every aspect of our operation. But it was my goal from the start to reestablish this relationship with the district. Having some knowledge of education foundations from my years at schools, I knew that although we're an independent operating foundation, our primary goal is to support the school district in the county in which we operate. And I didn't feel like that was happening at the level that it should. And Cindy's mentioned a couple of things that I vowed to do early on. We were able to increase the funding for our high impact grants, and I'm very proud of that, but I'm equally proud of the fact that I involved Cindy in that process, which was involving the district. Before, that didn't happen, and not all of the projects that were funded were necessarily meeting the needs of the school district in a way that they could. So I felt like this year, the projects met the needs. They matched the strategic plan, as Dr. Moore mentioned and referred to. So we're looking over time. Admittedly, our capacity at this point in time, we're trying to build our capacity. I believe we're going to. We've fitted in the programs that we're currently offering to the district into these pillars where we think they best fit. And our next goal is to not only strengthen these programs and make sure they're meeting the needs of kids, but as we add programs and services, working very closely with the district to ensure that they're meeting the needs of the students and meeting the needs of the strategic plan. I believe the strategic plan is well written, and if we meet the needs of the strategic plan, we're going to be meeting the needs of students. So I appreciate this opportunity to to speak to you briefly and also to begin some deeper work with the school district and change the way that we've done some of the programs in the past so that they're better. They're good programs, but I think they can better meet the needs of students in Indian River County, and that's our goal.
Thank you, Mr. Herron and Ms. Emerson. I think when I first initially started to meet with Doug, I may scare him a little bit because of the potential that I see in terms of this partnership. And taking the time to grow it is very, very exciting to me. Having this partnership in place really does allow us as a school system to focus in on the main thing, keeping the main thing, which is student achievement, while at the same time maximizing through this relationship opportunities to enhance the support and services that we provide to our students. So Ms. Emerson will remain involved in this work. We will continue to bring information to the board regarding the opportunities that we're engaging in to fund, to raise funds, and how we're making modifications or changes. I will continue to bring to the board opportunities to look at the priorities that we would be endorsing through the Education Foundation and ensuring that we are focusing on the things desired by the board before we going forward. But this is the concept that we have worked together over the last several months. Very excited to bring it to the board and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, before, I know there are probably several people. Mr. Zario, you've spoken first a couple of times. So Mr. Barefoot, is there anything that you wanted to ask first? Oh, you need your volume on, Mr. Barefoot.
Is that us or him?
How's that?
There you go.
Perfect.
Obviously, I spoke with Mr. Herron and actually his board way back when, I can't remember, several months ago. And the model that I've always focused on that really works well in Indian River County thus far is the one that has been employed at the hospital for many years. And it's very focused on very specific projects so that donors view those projects as you would make an investment with a known outcome that's expected. They're not programs, which I always viewed, and maybe I'm being oversimplistic here, as the purview of the Educational Foundation, but rather thinking in terms of singularly focused, very specific projects, most of which are capital, but some of which could be endowing certain types of activities and/or positions. And as we all know, we're fortunate enough to live in a very a generous philanthropic community. But I would tell you that outside of the indirect support that comes from, let's say, Quail Valley Charities or Johns Island Foundation or other similar type activities, I'm not aware of any of the major philanthropists in the community that actually give money directly to the Educational Foundation. So part of the rollout of this new focus has got to be in creating, call them ambassadors, or expanding the board of the Educational Foundation to include some of these folks that have been very active and supportive on these kinds of singularly focused projects. And as long as this evolves over the next few months, we keep in mind that there's a lot of interest in supporting public education in the county that was not there a year ago. And we've got to take advantage of that. And I think selecting board members and/or an advisory board and/or individuals in some of these communities that can be a liaison or a facilitator connecting the projects that the district identifies that are going to be facilitated through the Ed Foundation is critical to this thing working. So this is a good start. We didn't need to confuse the community with creating yet another foundation. While there's plenty of 501c3s in the county, sometimes I almost think there's too many because the missions of some get confused with the missions of others. But so I personally look forward to contributing in one way or another to perhaps identify some people that could be recruited, call it, whether it's for the board and/or for whatever type of project-related committees that are established going forward.
Great, thank you. Dr. Jones, did you have anything?
No, I just want to thank you for, both for meeting together and bringing it all together with our strategic plan and what we need and the impact grants. And I look forward to seeing what this vision will be with the district and Ed Foundation. Thank you.
Ms. Rosario?
Thank you. Dr. Moore, can you please send us the Big Ideas pamphlet that was shared? It wasn't in the backup information. And I think that would have helped us, I suppose if we had that in front of us, have more questions if we had any. So that conversation cannot be had at this moment, even though we were prepped in advance quite a while ago. Mr. Herron, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for the work that you do. About 2.5 years ago, I brought to the board in an item to begin the discussion of creating a foundation here at the district level. Just recently, I think in December, we discussed it again, and at that point, we decided that we were going to move forward with creating one of our own here at the district. The interesting part is that the Education Foundation was never a part of the discussion. Not at any time did anyone say, we already have a relationship with the Education Foundation, even though we know that you have always been, or rather the foundation has always been a partner to some of the things that we do, here in the district. So my question is not so much about the pillars or the big ideas that Mrs. Emerson has worked really, really hard at creating. My question is with regard, because one of the reasons why we discussed and why we initially thought it would be so important for us to have a foundation of our own is that we would pretty much have somewhat of unfeathered autonomy to make some decisions if there were a need for something that was not tied to taxpayer funding. We can in-house say, yes, we're going to approve that, or have this application process. For example, a student recently, unfortunately, lost both parents. His mom was an employee of ours, and this young man really deserved some well-needed scholarship for college. It was I believe that if we had our own foundation in-house, we would be able to say, let's go ahead if we had the money, let's go ahead and approve through our process and our protocols of X amount of money for scholarship for this particular student. Where would that kind of partnership with the Education Foundation fall if it were a part or separate from these pillars and these big ideas that are being proffered to us? How would we be able to work with you on individual things that may happen, that might arise? And maybe in part because I'm unsure of how that works. Maybe it's not a part of what you all do, but please help me understand if you do, what would that look like?
Well, I will say that even though it may not have been a part of what has happened in the past in the relationship between the district and the Ed Foundation, the sky really is the limit as far as the services that we could provide for the district. If I'm understanding you correctly, you're speaking with regards to some sort of emergency situation where X number of dollars may need to be diverted from one program to another program. I would tell you that even though I was telling Cindy earlier, I had my first opportunity a couple of weeks ago to meet with the consortium of Florida Education Foundations, which was the first time in 1.5 years that we've had a face-to-face meeting. And I met with a lot of the other executive directors. In Florida, about 50% of the foundations are direct support organizations, which is what the school district was exploring earlier, and about 50% are independent 501c3 nonprofits like the Ed Foundation here in Indian River County. Regardless of what type of foundation, it is a certain amount of independence has to be there between the school board and the foundation, whether it's a direct support organization or an independent foundation. And dollars and monies are also often earmarked for particular programs. So, you know, even for a direct support organization, it might be difficult at times to say, ooh, we have an emergency where a student needs a scholarship, let's make it happen. You would need to have funding available either in your general fund or specifically for scholarships. So the way we may be able to help you, I will tell you, we provided a $60,000 gift to the school district at the beginning of the pandemic for laptops. So that was an emergency appropriation that our board met quickly and approved from our general funding. So those types of things, I don't see a problem with those types of things happening either. Mr. Barefoot's very right. I agree with him 100% that we need to improve our fundraising abilities and lessen the programs that we're running. One of the things that I've already accomplished is we're slowly turning over the implementation of the science fair to the school district. For years, it was a program ran by the foundation. I don't really think that's the most beneficial way to run it. We didn't really have the expertise. The school district, the science coaches, the science staff in the school district knows what to do with the science fair. And so we've turned much more this year. Unfortunately, we had to have a virtual fair, but we're returning to a face-to-face fair in the year ahead, and they're going to be running that program. We're going to focus on funding the program. So I don't really see a problem, and I hope I'm answering your question, with those types of emergency situations, so to speak. If monies are needed, the Ed Foundation, we want to meet the needs of students, bottom line. So, and that differs for every student. There may be an individual student that a need is truly there, and we'll do everything within our power to meet that need. It might be something we can meet immediately. It might be something we need to work on. But by reestablishing this relationship, I think we're going to be able to work on those types of things together and not separately like has been done for the past several years. Admittedly.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Schiff, do you have anything?
Just two very quick things. Can you clarify for me what the phrase investing in collaborative cultures means?
You wrote that.
Okay. So what it means is making sure that we are putting the time, effort, and energy into getting together so that we're being proactive rather than reactive to the needs of the district. So those collaborative cultures are really between the Ed Foundation and the school district, and making sure that that is a priority.
So you are talking about a culture of collaboration, not collaboration among and between varying cultures.
Okay, can you
I'm
be
confused.
specific on where that is? Because I
Sure,
wrote a
it's-
very lengthy document.
I believe it's in Pillar 5. It may be in Pillar 4. I don't have the document
Okay.
in front of me, and it doesn't have page numbers, so I couldn't get page numbers.
Okay. So let me go directly to that. Okay, so for which pillar did you see? Oh, this is our guiding principle as a school district. This is one of our guiding principles. So what is in orange is part of the guiding principles of the school district. So that is in an effort to really focus in on access in our community, investing in collaborative cultures that promote the growth of all.
Okay. So probably better as a future conversation when I actually have the document in front of me, because I read that several times and I was unclear what it meant in the context of that document. We can have that conversation another
Okay.
time.
That sounds good.
Just a real quick thing, there's a typo on Pillar 5. It says integrity instead of
Sure.
integrity.
I will fix,
That's a
thank
simple
you.
thing.
I appreciate that.
That's it.
And just to piggyback off of what Mrs. Rosario had asked, there is a line that the Ed Foundation of Indian River County may convene stakeholders and community members in order to advocate on behalf of the needs of the school district of Indian River County at any time. So,
Mrs. Rosario, did you have another question?
Yeah, Dr. Moore, this isn't coming to us tonight to approve. This is just a presentation now, correct? Okay. Are we going to, when you give the presentation and I suppose solicit feedback from school board members on the strategic plan, is this going to be a
Yep.
part of that discussion?
So what we will do, and that is a great question, Board Member Rosario, we will finalize the strategic plan, and as we go through that process, we will solicit information from board members regarding the actual priorities. What we've done now is identify what we think are some good priorities. I'm sure there'll be some modification changes to some of those, and that's what we'll bring to the board to approval, the initiatives that will be a priority for the board, and that would be coming prior to the approval of the strategic plan, or with the approval of the strategic plan.
Yeah, because the board haven't actually, we have not gotten together to
Right,
decide what that would be.
Right. No, and that's right. I think we've had the individual meetings regarding the concept. What Ms. Emerson and Mr. Herring have done is look at some pretty good guesses, is the best way of saying it. One of the complexities of a school board is you all have to be together. So having this conversation together in concept, circling back individually, and then bringing back the item for final discussion and approval allows the Ed Foundation basically to go to work and partnering with us to begin to raise funds. That is
All right.
instruction.
Thank you for that. And just so that the public knows, we've had conversation about it one-on-one, and Mrs. Emerson has been in the room, but collectively as a board, we have not yet gotten to that stage. So it's important for us to be able, I work best when I hear feedback from fellow board members, their ideas, their input in a project such as this moving forward. So thank you for that clarification.
Okay, and Ms. Rosario is correct that she did bring this forward as an item for us to create a Ed Foundation of our own, because it was unclear as to what the Ed Foundation was doing. It kind of felt separate. But I did question that back then, because I was on an Ed Foundation in St. Lucie County, and I remember saying that I was on the board down there. And the reason why I remember saying that is because I remember saying they were very different in how they behaved down there than up here. Down there, we actually have, and the reason why I was on the board is because I was a principal at the time, and so there were 2 principals on that committee, on that board, and we sat for 2 years on the board. And I think that liaison was really good to have, that because you had the insight of 2 principals and what was happening on the campuses right then. So I thought it was a really good way that they had that. Also, the concern I had was, first of all, thank you for relating everything to the strategic plan. That's awesome. One concern, I didn't see it in here, I heard emergencies, Ms. Rosario brought up, but how about like a large project such as the new property that we have across from Vero Beach High School and what to do with that property? Would that be something that the Ed Foundation would be able to partner with us on for?
Definitely, and that's when I talked about increasing our capacity. When I talked about increasing our capacity earlier, that's the types of things that we want to work toward. And Mr. Barefoot was right in his assertion that we need to get better and focus more on attracting different philanthropists in the community outside of the normal grant funders, which are the ones we've been working with for the past several years. So that's our goal. And yes, there's nothing that prevents us from working on capital projects. We just never have in the past.
Got it. And if you're looking at expanding your board members, just think about that, about
Yes, we
principals
are.
on there.
We are.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for coming today. We
Yes,
appreciate it.
thank you for having me.
Dr. Moore?
That concludes this item, and really looking forward to partnering with Mr. Herring and team, we're going to do some absolutely great work. So we are just getting warmed up in this particular item. Our next item.
Mrs. Fairberg and Dr. Moore, could I just offer one more comment?
Sure.
In conversations with the Community Foundation.
Mr. Barefoot? Mr.
Yes.
Barefoot, I'm sorry, would you mind adjusting your view? Because all we see are your nostrils and your mouth. Can we see like a full face frontal? Yeah, thank you, appreciate it.
Well, you guys are lucky, awful picky. At any rate, in conversations with the Community Foundation, and I know in the past, I'm sure there's some coordination between the two. The Community Foundation and Jeff Pickering in particular is involved in a lot of the project-related philanthropy in the county, in the area, and a lot of the donor-advised funds work through the Community Foundation. So when you talk about focusing on some of the philanthropists that have supported all sorts of different projects in the county, coordination with the Community Foundation is going to turn also out to be key, because it's the museum, it's Riverside Theater, it's the hospital. These are the organizations that have received over the years tremendous support, and the Community Foundation is very much a part of that partnership between philanthropists. And I'm sure that's going to have to be expanded with the Educational Foundation going forward as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barefoot. Dr. Moore.
Our next item is a relatively complex item. It's listed as curriculum instruction update. I put that on the agenda anticipating an update being provided to our board regarding our K-5 adoption. As you know, we placed a placeholder on the agenda for this evening to approve a curriculum pending the outcome of our hearing that took place last Friday. So what I'd like to do at this time is ask Mr. Meyer to provide an update regarding a brief history of where we were, what we've done, and currently where we sit as a district. I'll remind the board, this is a hard and complex conversation. It is difficult to have. It is a very, very important decision that this board will ultimately make this evening. But I'm looking forward to engaging in this dialogue with all the compassion and grace that we need to ensure that we make the right decision for our community. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Meyer.
Through the chair, thank you, Dr. Moore. So I'll be pretty brief in going back in time, but I do want to go back to the beginning of this, which was January 2019, when Governor DeSantis issued the executive order to eliminate Common Core in our schools. He gave the Department of Education a very aggressive timeline that he wanted them to meet in order to do this. And so, less than, I think, 15 months later, the Department of Education established a new set of standards that was approved in April 2020 by the State Board of Education, a set of standards that was developed by Florida professionals, Florida educators, experts in the field, to make sure the Common Core was completely removed. And from there, after that approval in April 2020, in September, the Department of Education released their call for bids. They released a very specific set of criteria that the instructional materials needed to meet in order to implement these new standards. There were additional statutory provisions that had to be included in that. A couple of years before Governor DeSantis took office, there was a change to Florida statutes that required K-5 materials beginning 2021 included in the core the science of reading, which is that explicit systematic approaches to teaching phonemic awareness and decoding skills, so on and so forth. So those had to be built into these instructional materials as well. In October, we began to see which companies were going to bid on that, and were going to give products to the Department of Education. And we knew that here in Indian River County, if we were going to be prepared for the state to release their list, which is in statute required to be released on April 1st, that we needed to begin our review concurrently to the state's review, not knowing what they would ultimately do, but we knew that we needed to look at the prospective materials as well. So from October through March, the school district followed our internal procedures. We requested all of the potential vendors, the sample products. We pushed those out to the schools. Committees were formed, committees met, and the committees had a recommendation that I brought to the board in March, which our first recommendation was Amplify. On, I believe it was the 30th, the department made it on time. I think it was March 30th that they released their list of approved products. There was 4 products that made that list, and Amplify was not on that list. So we reconvened the committee and selected an alternate product, which was HMH. Per Florida statute and per board policy, there's a number of steps that we have to go through, when selecting any product, and that's that open notice public hearing for anyone to give comment upon the product. There's the item where you vote to adopt. There's the 30-day petition window. And we've accomplished all of this. We did receive a number of petitions to HMH. I'll remind the board that at the last item the board took action on, it was to approve the procurement of, to approve the adoption of Amplify pending FLDOE approval or HMH pending, the petitions. We had the petition hearing on Friday. Our board policy does give the hearing officer 14 days to approve or release his final order. We did receive that last night, which upheld the opportunity for the board to take action on adopting HMH. And I think that that's a kind of a concise, rundown of where we're at. Amplify is still not on the FLDOE approved list. There's talk and there's that they may be still continuing their appeal, and it may be being finalized, but we at this juncture today, the fact of the matter is that they still are not an approved curriculum that meets the criteria that the Department of Education set forth, and that HMH is on the approved list and has survived. I guess I use the term survived. It went through that process where the petitioners were able to state objections in statute, and those were not found to be upheld by the hearing officer. So we have an item tonight before the board to discuss our next steps, and that's kind of a recount there. Dr. Moore, is there anything else you'd like me to add of where we're at?
I think that summarizes the reality in which we currently stand. So we have a curriculum for K-5 that's been fully vetted on the state's list, approved by their experts. To be approved, we went through the process to allow the petitioners to state concerns. Those concerns have been dealt with or remedied through the hearing officer's findings. So in terms of the stated concerns, this board has every level of comfort that they can, in fact, adopt HMH without those concerns actually being a valid concern. Our first initial selection was Amplify. As Mr. Meyer stated, Amplify was the selection that we went with prior to knowing that it was not on the state's list. Currently, Amplify is still working with the state in order to, I know I'm repeating some of the things that Mr. Meyer said, to have it approved on the state list. We went through the state adoption process. We are quickly approaching the absolute date in which we need to order materials, train teachers, create pacing guides to be ready for the opening of schools. That date is quickly approaching. Every item that I've brought to this board has always said, if Amplify is to get approved, then we go with the first choice. I do not think I would bring a recommendation to this board that is not on the state's approved list. A item that's being approved by the experts identified by the Department of Education not being on the list is a concern. The experts at the state also not having it on, being able to get it on the list, whatever the process they're going through. So we do have Amplify as our first list. item, but it is not approved by our state board. I know there have been questions by board members, can we just adopt Amplify? And I think our community has had similar questions as concern. We went through the state's process regarding this application or how to procure those documents, looking at those curriculums that were on that particular list. In order to secure Amplify outside of that process, we would have to do a separate bid process. And I'm going to ask our school board attorney just to accurately state what I just summarized a little bit more effectively.
Thank you, Mrs. Bierenborg. And board members, Dr. Moore is correct. There are, as you have heard and discussed over time through this process, there are two ways for a school board to adopt curriculum. There is a process to adopt off the state list, and there is also the ability of a school board to adopt its own process and not adopt off the state list, essentially do your own procurement, have your own committees review everything, and have your own certifications that the instructional materials meet the standards that have been adopted by the State Board of Education. So Dr. Moore is absolutely correct. There are two ways to do it. At this point, this school board, this district, went through the process to adopt off the state list, and so that's kind of the playground that we're in at the moment. You can absolutely change your process. All it takes is time. And if you have the time, then you can absolutely change your process.
Thank you. So with that, just feedback or commentary from the board, we may have to update the item as it stands tonight was a placeholder. Just in listening to your feedback, my initial recommendation is that we approve the product that has been fully vetted and on the state list, which is HMH. And with that, I'll turn it over to the board for any discussion you may have.
Yeah, before I ask, and I know we all want to speak to this one, obviously, because it's such an important topic. But because you asked our attorney to talk about that process, I know that process has gone on with another district, Highlands. Is it possible to piggyback off of Highlands' procurement contract?
And that's a question that we would have to explore. In the general procurement world, as long as the bid put forth by Highlands allows for other local governments to piggyback off that bid and the vendor has approved that process, then the general procurement answer is yes, we can piggyback. But there are a lot of prior questions that we need to explore. What did they bid? What did the vendors then propose? Was it the same as what was proposed to the state that's been rejected, or was there a different product being proposed in Highlands? The procurement process needs to be explored. But the general procurement question of can we piggyback as long as the process allows for it, yes. But we need to answer those prior questions first.
Just anticipating that particular question being asked, Mr. Bass and myself did speak to their assistant superintendent for instruction as well as the superintendent. They followed the same state bid process that we followed. So with that, Suzanne, does that change anything? They went through the bid process through the state.
Oh, so they didn't do a local procurement process? Okay. Then they don't have a procurement that we can piggyback off of.
Okay. Right. If they had done the same way that our policy states, because I went through the school board policy with our attorney this week, and I asked, is there another way to do this? You know, and we have to go through, it takes 30 days, and then you have to go through the whole vetting. You have to get a committee together, and they have to be of certain people, and then you have to do it takes a year. So I said, is there any way to do it without a year? And she said, this is the way to do it if you can piggyback. So I did find out that there were two other counties that were looking at Amplify, one being Lake and one being Highlands. Lake counties decided to go with a different company. So Highlands did go with Amplify, or they are going to go with Amplify, I guess. But they don't have a policy in their board policies that says that they have to do it the way our board policy says. So we can't piggyback. But to change our policy, it would take 30 days and then another policy hearing. A year.
The other
Lake County?
Which one did you say that you said they went with another one? Which other one?
I don't remember. It wasn't one I recognized.
And these others that, so Lake went with some other,
Mhm.
and, oh, gosh, I'm sorry. So I'm sorry. So you said Lake went with another, and Highlands is now in the process of adopting Amplify.
Because-
At the elementary level,
Right.
same situation that we're in, instead of HMH, both of them?
I believe so, and that's what I was told. So I asked the superintendent if he knew, and they called down there. They don't have the policy, though, that we have in place.
So what is the actual difference? What is the wording difference between their policy and ours?
I'll defer to Suzanne.
I have no idea what the Highlands policy is.
Yeah.
So then how do you know that it's different? Mrs. Barrenborg,
No,
sorry.
what I'm saying is, I asked if we could piggyback. In other words, if they did the procedure the way our policy states, could we piggyback on it? Because that piggyback allows you to do it without having to go through the whole procedure.
Yeah, but the piggyback is just in terms of purchase. I see Suzanne shaking her head. A piggyback would be in terms of a purchase. So if they have, let's say, secured they were given a quote or a bid from Amplify, and the contract that they would go through, and of course, Suzanne, I'm looking at you because I'm trying to see if I'm on the right track here. If that county went through the process of saying, I'm not going to go with HMH, we want to go with Amplify, they go through the process of securing a contract with them, this is how much it would cost, it would be that bid that we would piggyback off of, correct, Suzanne?
But what we just heard from Dr. Moore, what the Highlands School District staff have just indicated is that they did not do a local bid process. It sounds to me like what they've done is just pick somebody outside of any statutory process that's allowed for instructional adoption.
So even if they did that, I mean, it's still outside of I don't understand. What am I
Through the chair,
missing?
I can only comment on the conversation that I had. I knew in order for us to piggyback, I understand those requirements, if it was a separate procurement process that they did locally with defined criteria. Not knowing what that criteria was, the obvious question to ask is, did you follow the state adoption process? The answer to that question was yes. They went through the exact same process they did. Amplify, not on the list. They're going to select Amplify anyway. My next question was, do you have a board policy that permits you or doesn't allow you to do that based on your procurement process? Her answer was no.
So I think we're just missing, it sounds like we're missing pieces of information. Not that, maybe we just don't know what it is that
Well,
we're
for
missing
them,
to
I
ask.
think the straightforward way is we have policies in place to protect us. Can't comment on another district's policy. I think we were exploring a possibility to use that as a piggyback to not have to wait our defined amount of time through our policy so we can have the materials in time. Based on that initial research and the fact that they did not do a separate bid process, that's not an option.
But we've already approved Amplify, haven't we? We've already gone through the,
Through the chair, we went through the process to adopt pending the FLDOE approval. So that process is contingent upon the FLDOE adding a product to their list. So as Mr. Gress has said, that is how we were approaching it, and it is still a contingent approval because it has not met the criteria set forth by the State Board of Education for the criteria needed in that bid, right? The science of reading, the content limitations, the actual standards that are there. That was what we were, and that's why most districts do that, right? I mean, if I know that I am tasked to bring a recommendation to the board of the highest quality that's going to meet legislative intent, that's going to meet the governor's intent, that's going to meet the State Board of Education's intent, then you want it to, you would have to draw your, local item. I don't see how it wouldn't match the state's item. So, we went with the state's bid specs because we knew that should the State Board of Education review those, approve those, that we would be in the clear and defensible in selecting a product that is meeting all the rest of the legislative intent. So, but it's contingent, right? So, we didn't find anything inappropriate there. Our teachers, and committee members found it to be, of high quality, but there is something which we have not been told as to what exactly is the holdup. We have not been told which criteria it has failed to meet, but clearly there is something that they're going through their litigation/appeal process to try to rectify, to clear that up, to get on the list.
So because we already approved Amplify and we already did the 30-day, we did that, just to clarify, we did that initially so that we wouldn't be stuck waiting another 30 days. We wanted to be sure in case Amplify was approved by the DOE that we can just move forward with Amplify. Correct, Mr. Meyer?
Correct. It's
Okay.
made it through that process. So any
Mrs.
day
Barron-
that happens,
Yeah. So Mrs. Berenborg, right now, we don't have to wait another 30 days. If we decide to go with Amplify, we can,
We do, and the reason, because I thought the same way you did, and this is why I brought this up at the very beginning, because he brought that comment up about that. We do have to wait the 30 days, unfortunately. This was another, I was trying to do whatever I could to try to help this with Amplify. He knows how many phone calls I've made in the last 24 hours. But I will tell you that I was hoping this was a possibility. The problem is, there's two problems with it. One, we have a policy that says we can't do it the way we thought we could. I thought by voting on Amplify and putting that forward and going through the bid process like we did, that would work. But we have a policy, and it's policy 2520, if you want to look at it, that says that if we choose to pick something that's not on the approval list, that we have to set up a whole new other way to look at the books again. We have to set it all up again and do the whole thing all over again. That's the problem, is we have that in policy. The second thing is, and I understand why the superintendent's saying this, there's a reason why books are approved or not approved on the state level. Having been on that team and been through that process, I understand how hard it is for books to be approved. And they are fighting the approval. Usually I'll speak last since I have the gavel tonight, but I'm going to tell you a couple, maybe this will help with some of your comments, a couple of the calls I made this week. It's very important they get on the approval process, for one thing. They get approved. So I called Amplify and spoke to a senior account executive several times. I've spoken to the Chancellor of Education. I've spoken to Kathy Seeds, who's responsible for this adoption process at the state level. She's the one who now they're all referring me to. Everybody, if you call the Chancellor's office or the Commissioner's office or the Governor's office, they're all asking you to call Kathy Seeds. I've spoken to her a couple of times in the last week. I've also spoken to Aaron Grawl, who has made calls on our behalf as well for Amplify. The concern is that the Amplify has been told what they have to fix, that they have stated to us that they've made those fixes. They've sent it to the state. The state is pending their second process of whether or not they'll be appealed or not. I found out that there is a meeting on that on Friday. I asked if they could have made the meeting before today, and the answer was no, that the DOE had it set for Friday. So Friday, they have a meeting that will state whether or not they have made their appeal. And so that's the information. I wanted you all to have that information before you made your comments. Mrs. Rosario, do you want to keep speaking, or can?
yes, please, because I didn't say what I originally wanted to say. I was actually asking questions to your original comments. What I originally wanted to say is that I appreciate the update and the feedback from the superintendent and Mr. Meyer. I have not yet had a chance to read the hearing officer's recommendation. I have not yet had a chance to fully complete the audio, listening to all of the public comments from Friday. I just received the audio, I believe, yesterday morning. I would like some more information. I have not looked at this policy 2520 that you are talking about. I'd like to be able to be to know what I'm saying, right? What's the difference in the in this other county's written policy versus ours? Why it's not the same? Piggybacking, talking about so basically, I'm not equipped enough at this time to make a well-educated decision on these matters. Because this is not a board discussion, I would just ask the board and the superintendent to put together maybe a special meeting for us to gather together so that we can collect all of this information and have a well-thought-out discussion. Specifically regarding this process, obviously. I don't believe that tonight is the opportune time to make a decision on this.
Okay, Dr. Schiff?
I'm not going to belabor at the moment. I think we've all been paying really close attention to how this process has been going, so I don't need to editorialize on any of that at the moment. I will say, though, I am not comfortable adopting a curriculum that is not approved by the state. I am not comfortable for this district adopting anything that has not been fully and completely vetted, that is not approved by the state, that if as we know, the district has reviewed it, the Board of Ed has reviewed it, the Department of Ed has reviewed it, the Commissioner has reviewed it, the Governor has not pulled it. There is, to my mind, nothing for me that, if Amplify were approved, great. I'm happy to go with that. And if it's approved by Friday, terrific. I'm happy to go with that. Because I don't think I think that Amplify would be a equally, not more, but equally worthwhile curriculum for this district. I don't think it's better. I don't think I think it is sufficiently vetted. I am concerned that the people who are charged with this responsibility, which Mrs. Barenborg says she has sat through many times, found issue with this curriculum such that they wouldn't put it on a state-approved list. I do not consider myself more expert than those people. I don't. And I don't consider the community more expert than those people. Do they have an opinion? Do they have a voice? Am I sympathetic? Am I compassionate to that voice? Absolutely. But do I think they know more than the people who have trained their entire careers to do this work? No, I really don't. It does not mean that their voices don't matter, but it does not persuade me to not approve a curriculum that has been thoroughly vetted, thoroughly reviewed at many different levels of government and this district, to say that that's insufficient for me. It's not. It's sufficient for me. I'm okay with it. So if, as Mrs. Barenborg says, this decision might be made on Friday, and if that doesn't substantially put us back to the point where it puts teachers in a precarious position where they do not have the time they need to properly train and become familiar with these materials, okay, I'll meet Friday afternoon. I'll meet Monday, or I have to look at my schedule, obviously. But beyond that, I'm not willing to delay. I'm not willing to delay because of the position that it puts this district and our teachers in, and I think our first, the level of review these curricula have already received is adequate, and I am not willing to put our teachers in that position where they have to scramble to keep up. And I am particularly worried about the level of scrutiny that teachers are under at the moment and the potential harm that does to teachers in our district and our students. That I'm really worried about, and I would like to quell that conversation as much and as thoroughly by this board and this district as we can.
Thank you, Dr. Schiff. Just an FYI, just so you know, I did ask what the drop-dead date is. Drop-dead date is the date that the school book depository can actually get the books to us.
So, and anticipating that question as well, and meeting with Ms. Becerra and Mr. Meyer, July 6th, that is the absolute drop-dead date. That is the date where order needs to be processed at the depository so we can receive the items, we can distribute the items, but more importantly, conduct the amount of training that needs to be done. This was my work for 7 straight years in Miami. And it started absolutely in March. So we are creating brand-new pacing guides. Those tools, the work that Ms. Becerra is doing, had the opportunity to review those. You know, she's taking what I did in 7 years and completing it over one summer. It's absolutely amazing work, but it is complex, hard work. Creating a one-stop shop for teachers to plan the lessons is very, very, very hard to do. So we need absolutely every minute of time so we can ensure that we're providing the appropriate pacing guides and resources to our teachers to do this work right. And that doesn't include the professional development. And we will, as an assurance to this board, which we've spoken about prior, we just don't outsource professional development. We're going to make sure this professional development, regardless of who the vendor is tailored to the needs of this board and this community. So we will look at and create that professional development together to ensure that it does cover the content that we want our children to be exposed to and is being done in a way to ensure that it is quality instruction being provided so we can hit the outcomes that we've defined for ourselves.
Okay, Dr.
So
Jones.
all that to say, July 6th.
July 6th.
Dr. Moore or Mr. Meyer, do you know how many districts have chosen HMH?
There are a total of 47 districts across the state who are using HMH curriculums. 14 of those districts are using the K-5 curriculum. That's my latest understanding. So the remainders would be their secondary products, and I don't have the breakdown of those particular items.
Just approximately. How many districts do you know have not selected yet?
I can just speak of the one district, which is actually having its board meeting tonight. So I think it is, what is it, Highlands? Sorry. Highlands and us are to the best of my knowledge, the last two that I know. In speaking at the conference that we were just at, every single superintendent that I spoke to, I did not speak to every single superintendent.
We got that.
Okay, delete that. Had already secured their materials.
Okay, one thing I have been looking at, and it's been great work by Curriculum Instruction, our 612, the language arts and math for the curriculum mapping and the planning and working within the block schedule, and a lot of work has been done there. And after talking to Ms. Becerra and a couple other people, we haven't even started on the K-5 because we do not have the series yet. So when I did science at the district here, and then I was on a couple adoptions as a teacher, first of all, this work has been going on for 9 months. It's October of last year. I can't remember. But it usually, and we backed up the calendar. I remember with Ms. Esplin to, okay, this is where we need to be. And if we have petitions, this is where we need to be. And this is when we need to order, or we don't get these books in time. Now, you said July 6th was the absolute deadline. When would we receive them?
Through the chair.
Order.
We would have them in time to be in our schools the week prior. So the 2nd, off the top of my head, is when, August 2nd is when teachers...
That's when teachers return.
Return. So we would want them the week prior to that. We want to afford teachers, as many of us were, teachers want to have those materials in their hands. That would be the week before. They're at school site. So if teachers wanted to come in and get them, that's late. That is late.
But that is just the beginning of getting that, let alone the training. We have not started the training until we get the books. And
We can begin the training, so we have Reignite. We can begin the training in the end of the summer months, which is the overview, the pacing guides. We feel comfortable with either company. Each have made significant commitments to come in and kind of front-load a great deal of...
That's if the board approves it, whatever we approve.
Correct.
Okay, also, I did read everything from the hearing officer and so forth, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Meyer or Dr. Moore, was there any issue with any benchmark, language arts benchmark K through 5?
Through the chair, no. Nothing was found to be in opposition to the new standards or to not accurately portray those.
And most of the petitioners, again, I wasn't there, but they were concerned about supplemental material, critical race theory. I mean, let's just put this on the table here. That's the main issue. That's the main issue, getting emails. I'm sure we get all the same emails or some different ones, but I said it in the last meeting, and many teachers have talked with me. they can, it's all they can do to teach this. Okay, so we're teaching students, we're not teaching benchmarks. And these benchmarks are clear, and what we need to do as far as our students for the testing as we go into the new year with the new benchmarks. And if we do not get this ordered, and again, what a wonderful world if Amplify had been on the adoption list. Wonderful world, we'd be going through it. But I just think also that when you talk to teachers and what they want to do and what they want to do to get going to prepare for this, I've been through this, getting a new curriculum, it's a lot of work, but we need to get going. And I have to echo what Dr. Schiff said. If this is not state adopted, and we had that concern from the very, very beginning, then I'm not comfortable. So that's all I have to say for now.
Could I ask,
Have just a
Can-
real quick follow-up.
Okay, I was going to say, can Mr. Barefoot speak?
This is a super quick thing that's
Okay.
relevant to it. Assuming materials would presumably be received by the week before school, correct?
through the chair, 2 weeks prior to school?
2
so-
weeks prior.
We-
Presuming there are no delivery delays, there's no hurricane, there's no, that sounds to me cutting it extremely tight and presuming a perfect world. Presuming that everything goes according to schedule, that's the date we'd have them, correct?
Through the chair, with unforeseen circumstances that would be drastically outside of our control, the book depository knows the volume that we have, which is the HMH product. They're ready to ship. Amplify would be shipping directly to us. They have those products ready to go, depending upon the approval from the State Department of Education, whatever that outcome would be. So getting them into us, into the schools, minus some of the scenarios in which you just, stated outside of our control, we feel comfortable that we would be able to get them in there, in the hands of teachers.
Yeah, I think it's just
Okay.
tight.
Let's
It's
hear
tight.
from.
It
let's
is,
hear-
it is. There's
And
no two
I-
ways about it. It is.
Let's hear from
Delay
Mr.
that further
Barefoot.
is significant. That's
Mr.
it.
Barefoot, do you want to weigh in?
I agree with many of the comments that have been made. I too am uncomfortable approving something that has not been approved by the Department of Education. These people in Tallahassee, that group, that review board, spent a lot of time and effort. This is what they do. Our review group, representing the schools that they represented and having received input from a number of teachers that would have to teach this curriculum, to have them choose Amplify first and HMH second, sort of tells the story. I guess if I were to propose a motion, I don't know what the drop dead date is. Is it January 6th? Is it, the 4th of July seems like a celebratory date, but there's no reason that we could not approve a motion that we will go with Amplify if they're approved by whatever that date is. And if it has not been approved by the State Board of Education, then we will go with HMH. And just pick the date. Keep our fingers crossed that Amplify is approved, whether it's Friday or next week. I think that we're running out of time, though, because with the 4th of July weekend coming up, I'm not sure, you basically got about maybe 5, 6, 7 working days. But I don't think we're really, from my perspective, have a choice but to go with the first choice that's been approved. If it's amplified by that drop dead date, great. If it's not, we go with HMH.
Okay, thank you. A couple of concerns that were brought up that I have seen and heard have been concerning the forewords and the introductions in the books. Could we have those be either avoided in our pacing guides or not included in our professional developments?
Through the chair, I'll defer to Mr. Meyer to give that answer, although I do know the answer. And he also touch on the critical race theory that Dr. Jones mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Through the chair, how we use and how we implement the use of these instructional materials, that's our decision.
That's right.
Right? How much time we spend in each chapter, how much time we spend on each section, how many, which resources we choose to do, that is absolutely a district-led decision, and certainly something that we can control. Those few comments at the beginning of each of the teachers' manuals did cause a lot of concern, whereas the bulk of the material, when you set, all of the K through 5 material for 180 school days on a table like we did last week, you realize that the program guide is, 2 pages of that. And so certainly I think the focus should be on what is actually presented to the students and how that's being used. And, no one wants critical race theory. The State Board of Education adopted the rule that says no critical race theory. They gave us a definition that I'm looking at now in their rule of what the State Board of Education considers to be critical race theory, meaning the theory that racism is not merely the product of prejudice, but that racism is embedded in American society and its legal systems in order to uphold the supremacy of white persons. That is not in any passage or any activity in the HMH K through 5 materials. That's not there. That is not there. And had that been there, I believe that would have fallen into the description in some of the other statutes about stereotyping and bias and some of those natures that we would have had an opportunity to petition. Our reviewers would have caught that. I think that that's exactly why we haven't seen it pulled from the state list, right? Because if that was in the HMH K-5 materials, it would have been pulled. But that's not, that when you look at those stories, none of the stories, none of the text, none of what the students are going to have says that by any means. So, I feel very confident by, moving with an approved product. It still meets the criteria of this rule, but keep in mind if the commissioner feels differently or wants to require publishers to amend their instructional materials that are on their list. I've told the board a couple times there is that statute where the commissioner can direct the publisher to correct any incorrect items that they find. So, that's why we want to go with that rule. We are definitely going to uphold and implement this state board rule. We will not have any critical race theory in our classrooms be taught by our teachers, and I'm confident that that does not exist as written by the State Board of Education and the HMH K-5 instructional materials.
Okay, and so because of that, I believe I'm still, sorry, it's still my turn.
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right. And because of that, and because we are expecting a lot of people to come and comment tonight, I don't believe this should be a consent item. I believe it should be moved to action. I understand Mr. Barefoot's desire to say that we should state a date and put things forward, because it is hard for you all to get back together again. It is hard for us to keep going back and forth on this. It is hard for the district to be in wonderment as to what this board is going to do, and we have to act. So, I agree with you, Mr. Barefoot, that I want to be able to say amplify if they make their appeal. That was your first choice. That is the one I think that I have been working very hard on all my phone calls and to different people to try to make happen. And for some reason, I will hopefully find out something after Friday. But I agree that we at least need to make sure that we have a book that is on the approved list, and we have it by the drop dead date. Anybody else?
I think we saw him.
Go ahead.
Yeah, since you, Mr. Meyer, mentioned, and obviously we're not, I'm assuming that all of you had a chance to completely vet the policy, to completely listen to all of the public comments from Friday, and to read all of the hearing officers' recommendations, because like I said, I have not had a chance to do that. Assuming that every board member is prepared to have this conversation is unfair. But still, I'm going to talk to something that Mr. Meyer mentioned with regard to the state rule and HMH. So this is, I sent this to Dr. Moore. It's a video of HMH talking about culturally responsive education, culturally responsive teaching. It's just a few seconds in the middle of this conversation, and I want you to hear, her name is Mrs. Flucker, Flucker, that's her last name. Listen to HMH's admission.
Sort of a larger whole student is the best out of them. There is this other sort of academic
I'll put it on the mic.
concept called, I do.
Where is this from, Mrs. Rosario?
Start by talking about and acknowledging this concept of culturally responsive education or teaching. It is really, I think, one part of sort of a larger whole student approach or puzzle, if you will. So student success isn't just about the cultural responsive education component. There are the influence from administrators and teachers, et cetera, what's happening in the home, right? A student's own motivation and how do you get the best out of them. There is this other sort of academic concept called critical wellness, which is about sort of the pedagogy, sort of critical, race theory, and then student wellness. And if you kind of get those three pieces right at the center, you've got an ideal or a better student outcome. I think there's a lot of work to do.
All right, this is on their website directly. I'll be free to give everybody the direct link. This is actually admitting that they're using critical race theory within their curriculum and in the curriculum pedagogy or in their explanation of kind of capturing what is, in their definition, culturally responsive teaching. So the concerns, since we're not going to have a board discussion on this, and this is going to be it, the concerns are that there is the admission that violates the rule. So whether we've seen it in the pages thus far, how do we're not, there is no, there's nothing in writing that will prevent them from adding these items to the future addendums. We haven't seen their online versions. We haven't seen their take home, if there is anything to take home. There are addendums and there are edits to curriculum throughout the years. They don't just create it one time and then that's it. So moving forward, board members, I think that's something to take into consideration. I don't think that the community is, it's not just what's on the preface or the first few pages of the teacher's guide. It's a complete ideology. It is a public commitment that HMH has made to this within their curriculum.
Ms. Rosario, would you quote the source and the name again?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It is IFE, Quick Conversations, Culturally Responsive Teaching.
Okay. Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
And where did you derive this from?
HMH's direct website at hmhco.com. hmhco.com.
Okay.
And if you can't find
Yes,
it right away, you can look for IFE Quick Conversations on Culturally Responsive
Okay,
Education.
hold on one second. Mr. Meyer would like to speak to that.
Through the chair, we can take a look at that. That's the board's discretion. But the way the bid specs are written, we evaluate the material that's presented to us, and those comments are not within the material that's presented to us that we would be procuring to use in our classrooms. So HMH is a gigantic multinational company. They have lots of different divisions, lots of different products that they produce. This specific bid for the Florida Department of Education was for the specific components of K through 5 ELA instruction, the HMH into Reading Florida. That is what was reviewed by our team. That's what was reviewed by the Department of Education, and those that is not a component of the product that we would be implementing within our classrooms.
One other thing, can I ask a quick question, the attorney, because I want to get some clarification, if you don't mind. Why weren't board members at the hearing? Because we were encouraged not to be there. We were told not to be there.
Yes, absolutely. And I sent every board member the same email recommending that you not attend the public hearing that was being conducted by the hearing officer. And the purpose of that is that the process or the board policy that was put in place is in steps. And I would equate it, we've never done an instructional material adoption process which involved a public hearing with a hearing officer. So just to equate it to you to some other processes that you may have been involved in over the years as a board member, to a student discipline hearing, which also involves an impartial hearing officer, or to an employee discipline or termination hearing, which from time to time will also involve a hearing officer. And the steps are basically, once the board has determined that it needs to follow this process, that you then appoint your hearing officer. Your hearing officer will intake the evidence, will intake testimony, will intake any documentation or other information, and make a recommendation to the school board. The hearing officer will decide, okay, that's relevant. Well, we'll hear all of the information about that. But there may be a piece of information that the hearing officer determines that's not relevant to our standard of what we're looking at. So we won't consider that piece of information, although someone may be allowed to talk about it during the hearing. And once the hearing officer intakes all of the relevant evidence, testimony, any of that information, they come up with a recommendation to the board. And that recommendation is then what's presented to the school board for you to then make a final determination. You can review the information, you can talk amongst yourselves at your board meeting, you can look at other information if you feel it's relevant. But the steps are make a determination that you need to have an evidentiary hearing. In this particular circumstance, just like your student discipline, just like your employee discipline or termination, there's an impartial hearing officer that conducts the hearing, and I make the same recommendation. And then, if it's a student discipline hearing, board members should not be attending that. Wait for the recommendation to come to you. If it's an employee discipline or termination hearing, you don't attend these hearings with the hearing officer, wait for that recommendation to come to you. So it was my same recommendation with regard to this. Allow the hearing officer who's been appointed to do their work, to intake the information, prepare that written recommendation, and then review your information and make your decision from there. So while we have never done an instructional material adoption hearing before, I'll be the first to say it was the first one here. We have done student discipline, employee discipline termination matters in the past, and it's the same basic administrative process where the hearing officer does their work, no board member involvement at that level. You receive that written recommendation, and then you come back in as board members and make your final decision. So that was why I made the recommendation. It came from me, and I understand there may be comments out in the public that you were somehow shirking your responsibilities. That is not correct. Each of you have done a lot of work on this, so you're not shirking your responsibilities. You're following the standard administrative process when we have a hearing officer kind of in the middle in taking evidentiary information. So
Okay.
that's.
Thank you. Dr.
Of course.
Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Meyer, for that clarification on critical race theory and that we don't have it in our benchmarks. One thing, when I was looking at the curriculum maps for language arts and math, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Meyer, it was said clearly that the state gives us the benchmarks, then we develop the curricular areas to support that benchmark. So we're basically, as a team, curriculum instruction and our coaches and so forth, developing the curriculum support for the benchmarks to be taught, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I think that is, I really want the public to understand that. We're not grabbing from other areas. We're not looking at, oh, this person's doing this or that. We're developing the curricular area, which is a lot of work for each benchmark, and excluding the things we need to exclude. Thank you.
Anyone else have a comment?
Yeah, I appreciate. I think Mr. Barefoot's recommendation I'm fine with moving it to action. I think Mr. Barefoot's recommendation to amend the motion with the included dates to approve what we currently have approved. If by a particular date Amplify is improved, we can give direction to the superintendent to go forward with that. But I do not think we should delay any further. I think it's a disservice to our teachers and our district, to be honest.
Agree.
Anyone else? I do understand, because I've, and we're going to hear from the public tonight, but I have been listening to the concerns and the website and the forwards and the tentacles. And this is a hard decision, it really is. But I also know that the decision is exactly what Mr. Meyer said, which could you repeat exactly what our decision needs to be centered on?
To the chair, I'm not sure which part you want me to reiterate, but I think that it's to make sure that we are, I guess for me, at least, is upholding the governor's directive that we eliminate Common Core and that we implement the best standards at the timeline established by the Florida legislature to ensure that, we are, as a board, as a district, doing things as directed by law. And by law, we are required to teach this set of standards with a set of core instructional materials that meet the science of reading. And these are the four choices that we have, and our committee has selected one on that list. And we need time to get that to our classrooms so that we can train on it and make sure that our students are successful.
And what can we do to ensure that these other components of what might come through as a tentacle or another concern or something in a flyer or something in a online resource, how are we going to ensure that that's not going to be CRT in our schools?
I mean, I think that there's going to be a lot of work for that holistically, right? Not just in ELA, not just in K through 5, but across the district, clearly with the state board's directive to make sure that this doesn't occur. We're going to have to do a lot of training to make sure that any materials that are out there or that people may want to try to bring in, because that's something that teachers like to do. They like to find other things, that they're not of that nature, right? I mean, that's our obligation now to make sure that that's not in our classrooms, and one that we intend to uphold, not just for this particular adoption, but for all. I mean, any material that we may have. But I do think that there's maybe some miscommunication, misinterpretation of what this means. I go back to the state board's rule that's given us a definition. That doesn't say social emotional learning, right? Trying to take social emotional learning and saying, well, that's critical race theory. That's not what the State Board of Education said in their definition. And so, yeah, we have work to do with that. And I do think that, there's other legislation that is yet to come to fruition that is a very important part of this process also. If or when the Parental Bill of Rights is passed, we want to engage our parents. We want to have a process so that if people feel like this is in our classrooms, that we make sure we have that dialogue and we know that it isn't. So, I mean, that's work that we know we have ahead of us, not just for this, for everything else. But again, looking at this definition, looking at what we are not supposed to do, I have every confidence that HMH still, the product, once again, Ms. Rosario's comments are valid. There's, I guess if that's somewhere in the HMH sphere, that's one thing, but it's certainly not in the HMH Into Reading Florida package, right? I mean, and that, I guess, was maybe one of the things that last Friday the petitioners spent 95% of the time talking about things that had nothing to do with the actual instructional materials that are going to be put in use in our K-5 classes. So.
May I?
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Jones.
Let's say Amplify gets approved today, tomorrow, whatever. Are we 100% sure there's absolutely no issue with Amplify?
Through the chair, I would not feel confident speaking for the rest of the community members. I think that some of the community members, if they were to
I mean, the same type of concerns.
I'm not going to speak on their behalf,
Okay.
but I would assume that there's probably a strong likelihood that many of these community members, if they had to do the old Pepsi taste test challenge and looked at all of these things, that they would find similar concerns in each of the products. But I go back to the bid specs, and that was the case that I presented on Friday, was that the state with their ELA bid specs required multicultural advocacy.
Right.
There's many things that are within those bid specs that I think that are why the publishers are doing what they're doing. I don't necessarily believe that they were all doing this independently. I think they were trying to meet the intent of the Department of Education's criteria.
Thank you.
Dr. Schiff, sorry.
Out of curiosity, Dr. Moore, I know you're relatively new to the district, so this is either a Mr. Meyer question from his broader experience, or it might be a Ms. Dampierre question. Just letting you know up front.
Pay attention, Pam.
To the best of my understanding, aspects of social emotional learning have been integrated throughout our curriculum for many, many years now. Elementary teachers are told, and I'm going to paraphrase this badly because I'm not an elementary teacher, to teach to the whole child, to teach to the social, emotional well-being and capacity of the whole child, and that has been a consistent element of our curriculum long before we ever started talking about HMH, this curriculum adoption, new standards, or critical race theory. Am I correct in that? And if you have some timeline for when, which you may not, you may not have that off the top of your head, for when this started becoming a thing in the curriculum, which I believe may be a decade?
There are certain aspects that were required, especially when we had the Stoneman Douglas. I would say 2.5 years ago, there are requirements that we are to infuse certain curriculum dealing with social, emotional, human trafficking, and all of that. It's part of the instructional process that is handed out from the state. And Mr. Myers will attest to that. We have to submit that, how we're teaching it, when we're teaching it, all of that we have to submit in July of every year. Has that changed, Mr. Myers?
No, ma'am.
So it is only recent that a connection has been
Because of-
put forward that this is somehow about teaching critical race theory, when in fact it has been the work of our and districts across the state, at the very least since 2018, but to the best of our knowledge, since considerably before that, particularly for young children. Is that true?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's been a requirement since 2018, 2019.
Okay, Mrs. Rosario?
Yeah, I've been saying for a long time, social emotional learning is not critical race theory. I've said it over and over again. However, there are, it seems to be, not here in this district, in other places, it seems to be morphing even before my eyes, where I'll pick up an educational pamphlet, educational institutions everywhere, publishers are changing and adding some of these elements of critical race theory into social emotional learning, and it's just, it's really saddening. It's really very sad. So we have not had that here in this district. Social emotional learning in this district has not been shown to have anything to do with critical race theory.
No.
We have been, I suppose we've adopted it. We have, it's within our instructional materials as well, our focus for a very, very long time. I certainly don't want it to morph, and I know that Dr. Moore and I have had many conversations. I don't want it to morph as the social industry out there or whomever out there is morphing and mixing some ideology with some things that are really, really critical to the wellness and foundation of children. With that said, I wanted to talk to a point that Dr. Jones mentioned, and it just totally skipped my mind right now. You had a question to Mr. Meyer. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
If anyone hasn't selected a book yet.
It'll come to me.
Okay, so
It was really addressing something that she just asked you, and I just wanted to, it just skipped my mind. It'll come to me, I apologize.
Where's the quick replay? We don't have a quick replay.
What did you just answer her?
About the standard? Is it about the standards?
That was Ms.
We
Barrymore's
develop the
question.
standards, I mean, they develop the benchmarks, and we do the curriculum.
Correct. Oh, was it about our implementation of the use of the material?
Yeah, I think part of it was whether the community members would see the same things and amplify. That's what it
Oh,
was.
there you go.
Okay, yeah,
There
yeah,
you
yeah.
go.
Okay.
Yay, got it. Okay, so in the research that I have done, Dr. Jones, on Amplify, What I have found, like many other publishers, is that you're going to find culturally responsive teaching and the elements that seem and appear to mimic critical race theory within culturally responsive teaching. It seems like many of the publishers have adopted that, I don't even know what it is, strategy, theory, whatever it is, because we haven't even defined what it is here in this district, culturally responsive teaching. So on that front, you'll see part of culturally responsive teaching within some of the Amplify, I suppose, their curriculum. What you don't see is the blatant outward public commitment to to all of the things that are within the rule that the DOE has put forward. So I don't know if that would help you at all with response to what you asked, Mr. Meyer.
Thank you. I have been following along with the adoption committee, and I guess the main reason I asked that question is, again, everybody be happy if we have Amplify, and then all of a sudden other things come up, because there might be a little bit here, a little bit there, and we may have to deal with that, but I'm just going to go back to what our students and teachers need, and we need to get moving on this. If there's a drop-dead date, that can be brought up tonight, but we have got to be moving on this. Otherwise, we are doing a total disservice to our students and teachers with these new benchmarks. And like I said, we're all hoping that this year is somewhat of a normal year or a really normal year. And I don't want to put our kids behind. That's the bottom line for me. And I've said it before, we're not teaching critical race theory. Mr. Meyer has talked about what it says. And we've got to move forward. That's our responsibility.
Okay, seems like we've exhausted our conversation now, but I will say that it is important that we have a similar conversation tonight. I think the community deserves that. They deserve to hear the whys and the questions and the wonderings, and I think that's important. That's why it needs to be moved to action. So could we have that item then reworded, moved to action?
Through the chair, I'll summarize the information regarding the drop-dead date and move it to action. And if that doesn't accurately capture the will of the board, then we can modify it at that time.
Then a board member can modify it at orders of the day.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that? You're going to modify, you're going to move it to action?
I will move it to action, and from there, we can create someone can make a motion regarding what the vote would be.
Comparable to, or in line with what Mr. Barefoot suggested?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I just want to, as we move on to the next item, I'm going to set up a little tease for this evening, because we may have a few people watching. The Florida Department of Education just officially released third grade scores. We have been waiting for the foot to drop regarding the
I wonder where y'all were going. All right.
I remember that date. They're out.
What did I say? The other foot to drop regarding the impact of the COVID slide. And the state of Florida went down 4 percentage points in third grade reading.
State of Florida.
The state of Florida went from, I don't have it in front of me, but it went down
58 to 54.
But we stayed the same.
58 to 54.
But we stayed the
Only
same.
10 districts in the state of Florida maintained or improved. The school district of Indian River County was one of those districts who maintained at 60%, moving to a 6 percentage points above the state. African-American students improved 3 percentage points, so we are continuing to see that. And we are a district, we don't have percents for every single district, but we tested 99% of our students. And if that doesn't speak to the caliber of our educators in our classrooms in the midst of a pandemic, I don't know what does. Those are significantly different results across the entire state of Florida, regardless of the models in which students enrolled. This district got it significantly better than the overwhelming majority of districts. Only 10 out of 67 maintained or improved. We've hit that mark. We will improve 7, 8, 9, 10 rankings in terms of third grade performance. And that is significant in the midst of a pandemic, so we should be proud of that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that this evening, but now that it was officially no longer embargoed, I wanted to talk about it because I've been waiting a week. The next item on the agenda is the school board protocols. I want to thank Ms. Rosario, Dr. Schiff for collecting the notes, editing the notes. Nancy Eplin, myself, Suzanne, we put them together and then sent them back to you. I don't know if you want to take the time to review. This is absolutely your item to discuss, but I just wanted to put it back on the agenda for you to have that time.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Schiff, go ahead.
Can I make a suggestion? That as this is not particularly urgent for
Right.
today,
Thank you.
we're almost at 4 o'clock, and we have a long meeting ahead of us tonight, that we table this for another discussion.
I'm fine with that. Is
I
everybody fine with that?
totally do. I think this is an item for school board discussion anyway. I think we're mixing, I'm finding a mix of items on the superintendent's presentations that shouldn't be there. We should have had this on a board discussion item, as a
But
board discussion item.
Dr. Moore, you added it, right?
No, through the chair, I added it, and I said I would add it at the last meeting because it was a board priority. And I think sometimes just waiting to have a discussion, we don't meet again until late July, and then the next meeting is also the first day of school, so we're tentatively canceling that meeting. So just to continue to have it, and then working through board members to make sure items are being done in a timely manner. I obviously do not mind giving up some of my time to ensure that the board has the proper discussion regarding things that are timely.
I agree to table it. I think we've got a good start on our format and gone through about 6 or 7 of these, and maybe we could just kind of look at these in our time and see if we want to add anything or delete.
Okay, Mr. Barefoot, are you fine with tabling that?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, sounds good.
Next item is the parent bill of rights. Ms. Baird.
Right, I asked to put this on there, and again, this is a mix of our items and Dr. Moore's, however, this is very timely. The Parents' Bill of Rights, I had invited Representative Grawl to come tonight so that we could actually hear from her exactly what the bill is, because there have been some different interpretations of what it is, and I wanted us to be able to question her and ask her exactly what the bill entails for the school districts to do. That bill has not been signed by the governor, and he has until next Wednesday to sign it. So we just felt like it wasn't an item that we needed to discuss right now because it hasn't been signed into law. So I am bringing that back in July.
Absolutely.
Okay?
And our final item is Mr. Bass, and we've discussed the salary handbook individually, so he'll quickly review the salary handbook.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Through the chair. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, board briefings went over with the salary schedule with you, just so everybody's on the same page. Some people in the district, maybe new to the district, refer to it as the salary book, but it is the same document. And a couple of highlights. One of the things that we wanted to do was to put it in a much easier to read format than it had been previously. Dr. Suit and staff worked tirelessly to get that in that format which you have presented before you. The only real considerable changes in this document in regards to the format is we removed the calendars off of it because we wanted this to be a salary schedule book. We did not want it to include other things. We wanted it to be singular. Individuals can go to the website under the payroll section and get those calendars. I don't know why we were ever including it in this to start with. And then secondly, we adjusted the teacher salary schedule steps to reflect the 47.5 changes that were made through negotiations. And this will be on the board for approval tonight, or on the agenda for approval tonight.
Okay, board members, any comments or questions? No, ma'am. No? Mr. Barefoot?
That exhausts the
thanks.
agenda.
That is all? All right, well, unless anyone has anything else, I believe we will adjourn the meeting. This workshop is adjourned at 3:57.